Good afternoon and welcome to Flat Earth United. Joining me on this slightly dismal afternoon is Jonathan Vincent and Anthony Riley. How are you doing, gentlemen?
Greetings, I'm doing good, are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, can't complain.
Just recovered from a Timothy Osmond decibel last night.
Yeah, sorry, it was really good. I mean, I enjoyed it. Both you and Tim Osmond did really, really well. I mean, he was as combative as he always is, but that's to be expected from Tim Osmond.
To be honest, he was more of a gentleman than I expected him to be. I didn't know whether I was in for a grilling or whether I was in for a chat, and he was quite nice, to be fair.
I talk to him once in a while. He's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think he just wants to be loved.
Just wants to be loved?
Yeah. I think he's tired of being hated by everyone.
I don't know, infamy has its benefits. He's certainly given up his infamy when he gave out his identity.
All right.
Right, go on. Show us what you showed before. Right, so where was this? Where were you when you took this?
This was this is at the library. So I'm at the library and I look over and I see this gigantic globe. Like I was just standing there and I heard this whirring sound, this buzzing, and I look over and there's a gigantic fucking globe. But I don't know if people can see us on.
Yeah, I believe they can. I believe they can see exactly. We're watching your video with the.
I think you guys can see it, but I don't think the people watching can see it.
All right, let me just check the watch screen then, because of.
Yeah, because I'm watching the watch screen and I don't think they can see. Let me ask. Can you guys see a globe turning? I don't know why I had to speak like that. Can you guys see a globe?
And it's a rhetorical question. I don't think he actually means it. There is no globe. We all know that, right?
Yeah, right. We can see what you're presenting, though.
There it is. Nathan, you might be in control of it, so you can make it like larger. Because on the watch page, it's just a small little thing.
It's not. The watch page, it's big enough for you to see. Carry on, just carry on. It's working.
Alrighty. So here it is. Yeah, this is at the library. It's about 7 feet, 8 feet tall. And I'm looking at it and wondering why the hell the ocean is so goddamn big. It's the complete side. It's the whole side of the ball.
Yeah.
And there it is, sitting there.
And I see the same on my ball. I see that my ball appears to be the whole side of the ball as well.
I'm planning on going back there and taking my camera and getting it so I can, put it on the tripod and put it right up to the ball to see if I can get the perspective of like what we see, like from the ground, but it's not really going to look like that. I think in reality, if I did that, what that would look like to us in real life, probably look like a camera the size of like a building sitting there, like, boom, or like the size of the entire state of New Jersey or something.
Well, on mine, when I look at my globe, I can see that what I find interesting is most interesting is when you have, I'm trying to get the scale right, there you go. That's pretty much the whole side is the Pacific Ocean, but for the islands and stuff in the middle. But what I notice is that the Pacific is like the deepest and the biggest of the oceans. And for me, when I look at the Pacific, right in the middle of the Pacific, we see the international date line, we see Hawaii, we see Easter Island, and we see a whole host of other like Samoa, Polynesia, and a few other bits and pieces that are in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And I've always struggled with the notion that these islands are in the middle of the deepest ocean, yet they're islands. I mean, how deep is the Pacific Ocean? I know the Mariana Trench is like 7 miles or whatever it is, but isn't it kind of weird that the middle of the ocean is not as deep as what you'd expect it to be?
I always thought the ocean was a lot deeper than what it is, from what I've heard. That they can actually get to the bottom. Because do you remember that movie, The Abyss?
Yes.
James Cameron movie? It just seemed like there were areas that were, never ending deep.
Yeah. I mean, that Mariana Trench is the one key area that everybody relates to because we've all heard of it, and it's supposed to be about 7 miles deep. But essentially, when I look at this is where I think that the skewing of the maps has taken place, right down the international date line. Because when you look at the international date line, it's the part where they would close the globe together. If it was a piece of paper, they could bend it all round, close it together, and then they'd seam it. And they'd call it, well, it would have to be in the middle of the Pacific Ocean where nobody would ever know what was there. So I always struggle with the international date line in terms of every time I see it, it just feels like to me that's the stitching where they've put it back together. That's how it feels to me.
Yeah, none of it makes sense. None of it ever makes any sense. Never when it's a sphere, like if everything is pushed forward and is convex.
Yeah.
So in reality, if you were to take, Australia off the map and put it on a flat surface, it would do this. It would kind of like
flatten.
Yeah. It would flatten, and the perimeter would squeeze into the middle, which would shrink. It would shrink from the center.
I heard a useless fact on the radio yesterday. It said the hottest place in the whole entire world yesterday was Kuwait City, and it was 130 Fahrenheit. It was ridiculous. However hot that is, I couldn't even imagine it. But Kuwait City, when you look at Kuwait, that kind of makes you think that has to be the point where the sun is immediately overhead, and it's the closest it can possibly be on the flat Earth map or whatever map you subscribe to. But Kuwait City is the hottest point on the planet yesterday. It was just a ridiculous temperature. I mean, everyone moans about 100 degrees, 140 degrees in Kuwait City. I'm actually going to check it now just to make sure I've actually got that right.
30.
I think it said 140 temp in Kuwait.
That's really fucking hot.
Yeah, that's what it said yesterday on the news. So Kuwait City. So it's saying 44 degrees Celsius, and in Fahrenheit, that's 112. That's for today, and it's saying mostly sunny. So yesterday it was, 115. Maybe it said 114, but in any event, it's ridiculously hot. Let's try and get the. I can't get it
right now.
I can't get it for yesterday.
Wait. You know what the zip code is for Kuwait?
Kuwait City. Past weather in Kuwait City. The 14-day weather forecast, Kuwait City. Let's see what it was yesterday. What are we on now? 30th. So it was the 29th of April. No, I've kind of gone past it. But anyway, it's 44 degrees it's crazy. 44 degrees.
It's 111 degrees in Kuwait City right now.
111 degrees. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, but that tells me if you get Kuwait City up on the map, that tells me that they're getting the most concentration of sun now, like right now, today, like now. So the reality is the sun must be immediately over their head if it's the hottest place. I'm actually just trying to find Kuwait City, but in any event, that makes me think. Like, hang on, let me just get it on the map and just have a look at where it actually is. Kuwait City. I know it's in Kuwait, but I don't know. I don't really know where Kuwait is. It's not one of the places that I ever really pay any attention to. Right, so it's along the side of the Gulf, the Persian Gulf. So it's all right. So it's there. It is Kuwait. So it's alongside Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia. That's the hottest place on the whole planet Earth. So, but let's just cross-reference that out of interest with what happens with the flat Earth map in terms of the azimuth equidistant that everyone buys into. So let's just have a look at that. Flat Earth map, because essentially the sun should pass right over it. Let's just see if I can find it really quick. View that image. And then what we'll do is we'll touch on the stars, because Tim brought up the stars yesterday, and I find the stars are probably the most interesting part of flat Earth over right, yeah, because Kuwait City.
Okay, go ahead.
Kuwait City is over the Tropic of Cancer right now, which would be the highest point of the sun's path on the ecliptic on the flat Earth map. So it makes perfect sense. In fact, actually, I could do a show in this. This is fantastic. Right, how do I do this then in Skype? So it's share screens, isn't it?
I'll share it.
I've got it. Can you see my screen now?
Okay, you got it.
You see my screen?
Yeah. You have the plus button, right?
Yeah, the plus button, yeah. So the equator moves around basically through the Democratic Republic of Congo and Kenya, and that's the equator. But on the flat Earth map, the Tropic of Cancer, which is the upper tropic, passes straight through Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq. So the hottest point on the whole planet was right on the Tropic of Cancer. It matches perfectly with the AE map and the path of the sun. Now, I didn't know that before I checked on this, but that was a useless information. It was on BBC Radio 1 yesterday. The hottest part on the planet was Kuwait City, and it's right on the Tropic of Cancer. So that makes perfect sense on the flat Earth map, and equally it would do on the ball map as well. But when they say things like, "Oh, well, you're not got a predictable thing," well, that's kind of exactly matching what we see. So whoever's made this particular map's kind of done it perfect because it passes straight through Kuwait City, which I find really cool. But anyway, talk stars. Let's talk about the stars. Tim said yesterday about the stars that the two celestial poles prove it's got to be a ball. What do you agree with him?
Once again, star trails only exist on screen.
Ooh, that's an interesting view.
I've never seen them.
I see the stars as totally disconnected to the Earth. I mean, the shape that we live on is pretty much irrelevant for the stars because they're that far away. Even on the flat Earth map, that they're far enough away for us to be. We could live on a Pringle or a pretzel or a cornflake or a ball or a square. It essentially doesn't really make that much difference whether it's whatever the shape of the Earth actually is that we live underneath. The stars above us are not connected to us, and they bear no resemblance. So the rotation of the... I mean, look at this. The stars could be... I mean, let me just disconnect from my screen. Stop sharing. So I should be back onto me now. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Essentially, the stars... I mean, if we live on a globe, the stars above us really could literally be like that. You could be looking at the stars doing that in the night sky, and as the stars are spinning around us like that, you could be anything. You could be a flat screen like you're looking at on the telly right now, and you wouldn't know. The stars don't tell us anything because they're not directly connected to what we live on. So anyone that claims that the two rotation points prove it's a ball, man, and that 69 miles of traverse means that we move by 1 degree, it does the exact same thing if we live on a flat plane. Exactly the same thing. And the way I like to think of the southern rotation point, they tell us that the north rotation point is the North Pole. And if we do live on a flat plane, it would make sense that the southern rotation point actually should be a north, not a south. Because if it was a speaker magnet, then the center of whatever would be the rotation point, if there was a rotation point. But let's just say that basically what I'm saying is the southern rotation stars appear to be a North Pole in my eyes. I look at them and I see another North Pole. I don't see it as a South Pole. I see it as another North Pole on a flat. And it indicates to me that there's another world down there that we're not meant to know exists. You know when they say you can't go beyond 80 degrees south on the ball or 80 degrees latitude? I wonder if it's because that is the beginning of another world that we're not meant to know about. And the proof of it is the Southern Star's rotation point. Whilst Haunted's working out, he's doing something, I guess. Did you catch?
I'll be right back.
All right, no worries.
Possible doggy issue.
Nathan, are you still around? Okay, so it's me, myself, and I. All right, so whilst Haunted's out and about doing something and Nathan's on mute, I can hog the mic a little bit. Let's have a look in chat and see what's there. Oh, by the way, the Punch of a Train video, that's gone down quite well. I've got a lot of hate on that one, but if you've not seen my latest video on that Punch of a Train, that Soundly guy, he came in last night after Tim and essentially got to the point where I said that my evidence was stronger than his evidence and his evidence was contradictory to mine. And essentially I was able to, on that basis, dismiss his evidence as something else was going on and accept my own evidence. And he's not prepared to even consider my evidence because he claims it's ambiguous. And I'm like, well, okay, that's fine. But the reality is my evidence is nearly double the distance as yours, and it shows nothing like what yours shows. So I concluded that his was something else was going on. And I released a video last night. Me and Ranty were just brainstorming, and we realized that it's the power lines themselves that are causing exactly what we see in his footage. And I know how they're doing it, and I know what they're doing, and I've got somebody else to explain this better than I, because it's not my area of expertise, it's somebody else's, and I'm not going to do it any justice. But within the next 3 or 4 days, I'll be getting the guy on, and he can talk about it, and anybody that basically thinks that I'm full of shit, okay, no worries. But when the guy comes on, let's just see whether the physics backs me up or not, because the reality is this: high voltage power lines, close proximity to water, electromagnetic fields influence the water to some degree, in that they line up all the particles of the water itself. And when the water is evaporating and the moisture that's already in the air itself, I believe that that's breaking the bond of hydrogen over oxygen in water and essentially releasing a shitload of hydrogen and oxygen. And we didn't realize. And what that then does is makes Snell's law apply, because there's a shitload of hydrogen and a shitload of oxygen going up into the air, distorting the reality that we see. And essentially, you've got a change in medium. If you think of a fractional distillation column, and you've got like the air that we're in that Pontchartrain video, it looks to me that there's a layer above it of gas that's not our atmosphere, that's in the middle of disappearing up. But whilst that layer there is kind of overlapping with our our atmosphere, that buoyant layer is making its way up. That's going to make the light do weird stuff. And that's how I see it. There is physics to support it. I'm not going to be the one to explain it, because I don't explain it because I mess it up. But essentially, I think that we're looking at the decomposition of water in the vapor atmosphere, as well as the evaporated water. And I think that's what we're seeing. And I think when you consider the ratio of decomposition of water in terms of how much hydrogen comes out of water, how much oxygen comes out of water, the reality is if it is going on there and there is science to support it, you've got to accept the possibility that we're seeing through a massive layer of hydrogen and oxygen being decomposed from the water. And that would explain exactly what we're looking at, in my opinion.
But can I ask a quick question, though? Because did you read Flat Earth Math or Charles's comment on your Snell's Law video?
I think I responded to it, yes.
He was essentially saying, from what I can glean, that it applies because it's applied, first and foremost. But he's saying that it's not fair to say that the change in atmosphere that applies when you're using the stars wouldn't also apply when you have different gradients of density in the atmosphere. I think that was basically, I'm probably butchered his point a little bit, but you know what I'm getting at, I'm sure, from memory.
To be honest, there was a lot of comments on that video. Let me. I don't want to do him an injustice and misquote him. Let me read what he put, because I think I can deal with this quite comfortably, but I want to get it right. Why Snell's smells on Metabunk. I think that was the video. The reality is there has to be a medium change, because you don't get an angle otherwise. You get a curve, and the curve that we get is, here we go, Flat Earth Math. Was it his original comment, or was it one further down?
I'm pretty sure it's his original comment.
All right,
he says commenter.
Yeah, he said, have you been taking lessons from John the Phantom DeLauser? John is famous for his ability to take very basic definitions and twist them beyond recognition. In this case, you're using the word medium as chemical makeup. If the chemical makeup has not changed according to you, it's the same medium. Physics disagrees with you, and you can see yourself when you see heat mirages on a gently humped road in summer. Well, Phuket Word has done the exact same thing. It only works when you're looking practically tangent to the surface, which is what we do. Because the refraction or reflection, using Snell's law, by the way, bends the light a very, very small degree. But again, Anthony, you are ignoring the elephant in the room. A tiny, tiny fraction of a degree of refraction on the vertical axis only, and only right at the horizon, allows us to see certain globe Earth sites further than we should on a vertically perfect sphere with no atmosphere. But what causes the flat Earth sun to be visible or not visible with a 30-degree vertical displacement in angle? What causes the sun to be visible with a 60-degree horizontal displacement over a flat Earth? So essentially he's asking, right, so it's written in two parts. He's saying Snell's law applies in the first instance. Now, Snell's law only applies if you can calculate an angle as a result of going through a medium change. Now, there is no angle when you don't go through a medium change. There's a slight bend or distortion, but it isn't refraction. The way refraction is described is as a distortion on the vertical axis. It's a variation, which is what the Skunk Bay footage is, a variation on the y-axis. That is refraction. It's distortion of what we see. Now, the idea that we see light bending, even a very, very small degree over the horizon, it's never been proven. It's never been proven that there was something previously behind the curve of the Earth that's been brought back into the sight lines because of this bendy light refraction. All we see is the distortion and the shimmering, which is what you describe in the road. We only ever see that, and that's a vertical adjustment on the y-axis. But at no point have you ever seen something that was previously behind the curve of the Earth come back into sight because of this refraction thing. It's never happened. There's no evidence to support it's true, because you have to show that there was a curve in the first place for something to hide behind, and then you've got to show that the light can bend in our atmosphere. So the reality is, for that to happen, you've got to have enough of a variation to bend the light around a huge curve over a massive distance. Oh yeah, but you only need a tiny little bit. Yeah, but the thing with refraction is it goes both ways. It's an adjustment. It's a variation on the y-axis, so it goes up as well as down. So what you perceive to be coming up from behind the curve is simply it's not coming from behind the curve. It's just decompressing off the horizon, caused by the convergence of things that are getting to the horizon getting squashed. Nothing more. There's no evidence to prove that anything on the horizon is coming from behind the curve, because we know the curve doesn't exist. But even if the curve did exist, you have to prove that it's come from behind the curve and now being presented before you. And there is no evidence of that. All we see is the Skunk Bay footage and variations of where things stretch and squash. But that's distortion, not refraction as in bending around the curve of the Earth. It's just distortion of what we see. And we all see that with the heat haze on the road. So yeah, in one sense, he's conflating terms because he's using refraction as well as distortion. But the reality is, refraction is supposed to be viewing something that's fallen behind the curve of the Earth, it's out of sight, and then bringing it back into sight again. And it's never, ever been demonstrated to be true, because they've got to have a curve to put it behind the curve anyway. The horizon isn't the curve. The horizon is just the point where we can no longer see with our eyes. And we know that it's not the curve of the Earth because you can get a P900 and zoom right into stuff that you can't see with your human eye beyond the horizon. So that's not the curve of the Earth. So what I would say to Flat Earth Math is show that something that was behind... I mean, you have to show the curve of the Earth, first of all, but show something that was behind the curve of the Earth can be brought back into light by, I don't know, moisture or heat or lack of heat or whatever. But yeah, Flat Earth Math, I mean, he puts a logical argument in front, but he says that I'm ignoring the elephant in the room. A tiny, tiny fraction of a degree of refraction on the vertical axis and only right at the horizon allows us to see certain globe Earth sites further than we should see. No, it doesn't. All it does is it stretches it or it squashes it, stretches it or squashes it, but at no point does it drop behind the curve of the Earth. So that's what you're saying the elephant in the room is. I'm not ignoring the elephant in the room. I'm dismissing it as devoid of any evidence to support it. And although you consider it and accept it to be true, Flat Earth Math, I challenge you to present the evidence that makes that point. Because if you present that evidence that proves that point, I'll jump ship. If you can prove that there's a curve and that something fell behind it and at certain points of the day it pops up and then disappears and then pops up and then disappears. If you prove that that can be done with any empirical evidence, I'll jump ship. Because that would be proving the Earth, in my opinion.
It was fascinating yesterday when you were chatting away with, after Tim Osman had been on, you had a whole bunch of guests and a lot of them were your common detractors, let's call them. And one of them, who I'd never heard of before, he didn't have his face up on camera, but he said he'd taken night shots at your request. But when you presented him with your night shots, what he wanted was totally unreasonable. So saying, well, I can't see the building, and you're saying, well, the building's not lit. But what about this tower that we can see? And then you presented him with what the maths presents us for the heliocentric representation of what the tower should look like. In other words, how much of it's blocked. And he just wouldn't have it. You know, he essentially ignored it.
It's the elephant in the room. I mean, that thing that I showed in the Soundly debate last night was created by Mick West, the guy that wrote the Metabunk website. He went on to Google, and I don't know how he did it, but he did something that basically said, if you go to that location at that distance, this is what you should see. So I showed what he said, and he's the leading authority on it. He's the one that's the self-proclaimed authority, and everybody accepts it because of the standard refraction variation. So the likes of Dazza, the cameraman, and Sean Hufford, they all accept it and point you towards that one site because of the standard refraction. So when he gave us that which we should expect to see, and then I showed the whole tower, we'll look at basically what he was saying was the tower that we should have seen was like peeking up over the horizon. But actually, when we got there, it was the whole tower stood on the horizon. So what we're seeing is supposed to be like that, but it's actually ended up being like that. And that's not what we should be seeing. And there's no argument for it because standard refraction can only bend so far, according to Mick. And you have to start getting into the whole world of magicness. But when you look at the picture and look at the evidence, there is no distortion in the picture at all. It's very, very little distortion, if any at all, which tells me that there is no serious amounts of refraction going on there. And if it is, it's minuscule, which is exactly the way that Mick West tells us it is. When he refers to his calculation of standard refraction being based on the standard atmospheric conditions, which he's got a Wikipedia link for in his Metabunk website, click into that and it tells you it's a variation on the y-axis, which is I totally agree. That's exactly what it is. However, Mick West doesn't do that. Mick West calculates the standard refraction based on 7/6 of the radius of the Earth, and that is an arc. So he's basing it on, instead of being, this is the radius of the Earth. This is like the radius is from the center of the circle up to the equator at any point. So it's the core right up to the crust. But instead of divide that into 6 and then add 1/6 to it. So in other words, he's calculating the standard refraction based on an arc. So it's to do with how many miles you get an arc, and that's what his maths is based on. But he tells you the maths is based on a vertical variation on the y-axis, and it's not. The guy needs to take it down. That's why IPS is paying attention to him now, because IPS is like, yeah, there does appear to be a contradiction there in the maths and in what he says. So he's going to have a look at it and see if he agrees with me. But essentially, it's true. He says it's an arc mathematical calculation. He calculates an arc mathematical calculation, but tells us it's a variation on the y-axis, and it's not. He's lying. He's completely and utterly lying. So Mick's going to get his bum smacked.
I did find it quite interesting that while you were chatting with Tim Osman, it sort of came across that you have a load of detractors who, some of them joined you at the end of the debate with Tim Osman, and Tim Osman's stance was that, who is this mainstream cuck Mick West? What is he to me? I don't care if you're debunking him or not. But then immediately after, you've got all the people who use him as reference and use that site as reference. I mean, that was the first bit. I'm going to get this in now just so I don't interrupt your flow. But the other thing that was absolutely fascinating was when you got into apogee and perigee, and then you used a term that I was unfamiliar with in terms of this third potential celestial body that's the black moon. What was the name? It's actually got a name. Is it like Lilith or something similar? It wasn't that.
It's Lilith. It's called Lilith.
Lilith, right. So what's the deal with... I mean, maybe start with that, because that was new information to me. So what's the deal with Lilith, and where did you get that information?
Right, let's put the record straight. Tim Osman knew nothing about Lilith. He knew nothing about the Black Moon. He didn't accept, or basically this was a foreign conversation to Tim, but he brought it up, so I addressed it, and basically he got a shitload of answers that he wasn't expecting, and he ended up gish-gashing me with about 7 points that were nothing to do with it, but he started talking about it. But essentially, what we're talking about with Lilith. This is where what I'm going to do is in the main chat, I'm going to put in the guy that I always go to with anything to do with the sun, the moon, or the stars. His name's AJC1844. I'm going to put him in chat right now. So the thing that you've just seen pop up in chat a couple of seconds ago is what you really need to add this guy to your thing, your friends list, because or your subs list, because AJC1844 he's just released a video on Lilith, and it comes from essentially an almanac. It's basically a diary of all the time. Basically, every day it tells you where the sun, the moon, all the planets are, and the black moon, known as Lilith. Now, the black moon doesn't even exist in the heliocentric model. It's just something that they've not told us. I don't know why they've not told us, but they know what it is. The astronomers know what it is. They know where it is, and you can look at it and you can see it at certain times, because with it being black, you don't tend to see it you have to wait for it to pass between certain phases, and then you can see it. It influences the moon in terms of what we can see. It influences the Earth in terms of like it blocks out the moon. It creates eclipses that we don't even realize is caused by the black moon. We're told that it's caused by the shadow of the Earth. There's a serious amount of information about Lilith in the video that he's released recently. And like I say, Tim knew nothing about it. What I'll do is I will open up, I will get the link for the guy that's done it, AJC1844. It's called Flat Earth Smarts, and it's his most recent one called number 13, Cracking the Moon. And essentially, it's stuff that doesn't exist. This stuff doesn't actually exist, yet everybody thinks they know all about the heliocentric model. But the reality is, they don't. Nobody knows about Lilith. Essentially, it's just a black moon, but nobody knows about it. So anybody that's arguing in favor of heliocentricity really doesn't understand that they don't know anything about the black moon, and it's a celestial body that they do know exists, and nobody talks about it. I've put the chat in the link there now. You should just click on it and just watch. I mean, it's a 20-minute video, but it's basically the last 6 minutes, 5 or 6 minutes, where it's talking specifically about Lilith. But this black moon thing, it's kind of a big hole in the heliocentric model in that no one knows about it, but it's well discussed and talked about, and it does cause a lot of the shadows that we see on the moon, or it seems to, because they tell us where it is. They tell us where to look, when to find it. It's cool. It's really cool.
Struggling with mute, sorry. And what about the other bit in terms of him just regarding Mick West as a mainstream cuck, I think is what he described him as.
The other bit, remind me which bit. There was a few bits about Mick.
Well, basically, in your debate with Tim Osman's point was, who cares what Mick West says? That was basically it.
Right, Tim Osman doesn't accept that Mick West is a credible thing, yet everybody else that talks about it, if you get involved in the P900, you're usually going to be, if you're a flat earther and you're playing with P900s, you're going to be doing long distance observations. You're going to be zooming into it as far as your P900 will take you. And the reality is you're going to be calculating how much of the obscurity are we seeing by the so-called curve of the Earth. Now, Tim doesn't claim any superiority with Mick West for whatever reason. But everybody else that's in the flat Earth discussion makes you go to his website when you're doing any of these long distance observations. So we're talking Dazza the cameraman, Soundly, Sean. These people are the protagonists in favor of. Now, if they make you go there because of the standard refraction, and Tim Osman dilutes it by saying, no, it makes no odds to me. Well, okay, that's fine, but why is everybody in the ball Earth model arguing that you should be using that one if Tim says that we don't need it? So now Tim says that he doesn't value it. Essentially, it means that we've pretty much shown that there's a direct contradiction in there. Tim Osman now claims that there is no value in his website. So I think we should just splice all these informations together, put them in one big video, and say this is why you shouldn't be using Metabunk, because Tim says that we don't need to use it. So maybe we shouldn't be using it.
So I got a book the other day, and it's called "The Earth is Flat!" Exclamation point. Yeah, right there. Very thin book. It's actually for kids. It's the Children's Press. And basically, this is a book about the myths and where science goes wrong. And if you're thinking about the Earth being flat, this is the book that will correct it. So this is just in case kids veer off the narrow. This catches them. Let me read you some great mistakes. Scientists make many mistakes on the way to discovering the truth. Take a look at these quotes. I do not think that the wireless waves I have discovered will have any practical application. Apparently, Heinrich Hertz, German physicist, said that. X-rays will prove to be a hoax. Lord Kelvin, British physicist, said that. I am bold enough to say that man-made moon voyage will never occur. Dr. Lee DeForest, U.S. inventor, 1926. That's what the guy said back then. And, space travel is utter bilge. Richard Woolley, British astronomer, 1956. These are quotes of people that, the first guy was an inventor in 1926. He said, no one's going to make it to the moon. This other guy, Richard Woolley, British astronomer, said, space travel is utter bilge. whatever bilge is. I think it's a British term for garbage.
Yeah.
Here's a picture of the Egyptian flat Earth model. An Egyptian creation myth from more than 3,000 years ago tells us of the gods that make up the universe. Shu, the air god, separates Nut, the sky goddess, from Geb, the earth god. The sun god Ra travels over the sky, which is seen as a heavenly river. The creation myth of the Maya people in Central America is called Popol Vuh. It tells us how the god heart of the sky created people. His first attempts to make people from mud and then from wood both failed, but his final attempt to make people from corn was a success. Basically, they're like putting down like any kind of free thinking or like any kind of credibility to these old stories, ancient stories. And where's the some good parts in here? It's got our friend Newton, scientific laws of motion. Newton discovered the force of gravity after watching an apple fall from a tree. He realized that the force that pulled the apple to the ground is the same force that keeps the moon orbiting the Earth. Newton spent far more time and money on alchemy than he did on his famous theories that changed science forever. He believed that studying alchemy would lead him to discoveries beyond ordinary science. Unfortunately, they never did. I guess that's supposed to be like a quack there. And this is the woman who wrote it, by the way. Mary Atkinson.
What year is that book?
It's not that old. It's like 2008.
You wouldn't think that there would be a book this recent in modern times talking about anything to do with flat Earth, would you?
Well, the other book that is at the library for me is the Christine Garwood book, The Flat Earth, An Infamous Idea, which is, Dubé says it's a anti-flat Earth book, which I disagree with because it's got all the information he put into his book. He pretty much plagiarized it, and this was out in 2008. I'm still wondering how the flat Earth thing came out, if it was organic, and why all of a sudden did this woman write a book on the flat Earth? People write books for. I don't know why people write books. Sometimes
I think people are just uncontrollable. People just do stuff.
Well, I think most people write a book because they want to capitalize out of it in the hope that they'll make some money out of it.
But out of the blue, wrote a flat Earth book and went through all the accounts, Zion City in Illinois, the Bedford Level Experiment, Robotham, Carpenter, Winship, all those guys. Not Gerard Hickson. Lady Blount. She goes through all these step by step, just like all the books, all Dubé's books do.
But do you not think you have to have it in the consciousness of the masses to a certain extent so that it's understood enough to be ridiculed? In other words, if it was never mentioned, if it was never uttered, there's a danger that when you heard it, because it's the obvious and observable truth, it might really resonate with you. Whereas if you've been watching TV programs for many years and those TV programs say the Philistines thought it was flat, we know better now, you're left with an impression that Philistines think it's flat. Therefore, when you see it or read about it, you're kind of almost pre-programmed to dismiss it, even if the information's good. And from what you've just said, even about the moon and using Newton, you just think, well, that's kind of tied up in a lot of double speak and a lot of double talk, and the chances are there may be some truth in there too. We don't know how the electromagnetic field of Earth that we know is certainly there. We don't know the ins and outs of the details of it, how it defines up from down, all these things they may have wrapped into the bullshit of gravity to throw us off when you actually come to study it. And it reminds me earlier. I didn't get it in because I didn't want to ruin your flow, Anthony. But when you were talking about light but curving around the Earth, and you've got your model of Earth in front of you, it reminded me of 12 months ago when JLB was taking apart Event Skeptic and Matrix Decode, and they were showing the sugar tank experiment with the laser bending, and he basically just superimposed a globe into the curvature, and then had, I think it was Hitler on one end and a little boat on the other, and showing that was his allegory for light bending around the curve of the Earth. Yeah, but there we go. It's just. I think it has to be talked about. If it's not talked about, you're left with the danger that people might just go, "Wow, yeah, that makes perfect sense." So you've got to have heard of it to have it ridiculed.
Well, did we go live when we were talking about that Lake Pontchartrain, or was that done off air?
I can't remember. I spent about an hour before we went air. Before I actually pressed the start button, I spent about an hour trying to get my kid to sleep, and then she wouldn't. So I thought I'll try with her, and then that caused disaster. So we had a terrible start. Now she's actually asleep. I can't remember what just happened in the intro, so I can't remember what we talked about. But maybe repeat it anyway.
Right. All right. So last night after Tim left, Soundly was in my chat, and I said, "Soundly, come on, while we're live, you may as well come on and we'll discuss it." And Soundly's the guy that's done the Lake Pontchartrain observations of the pylons, the one that Dr. Zach got the wrong set of pylons for, but nonetheless made some good points in this video anyway. And Soundly came on, and basically my position with Soundly is that my evidence is stronger than his because I'm at 30 miles and he's at kind of like 18, so it's nearly double the distance away that he's at, that's from where he's at. So I'm showing next to no curve at all, and if it is curve, it's minuscule. But he's showing essentially, well, according to Soundly's evidence, we kind of live on a basketball size thing because nothing happens for a while, maybe 4 miles out, but then all of a sudden it roller coasters off into the distance, and it's really prominent. Which, to be fair, is probably consistent with the curve of the Earth if you have a smaller than what they tell us Earth. But in my eyes, it's miles too acute of a drop. It shouldn't be that severe. But that's what he accepts to be true. And most interestingly, he's got Cara Diane from Earth Discussions 2.0 to model it based on CAD. And apparently they claim it to be an exact match. But it's the only observation in any of the Earth where we see any curve. So for me, the way I viewed it was that goes against my own evidence that I've captured, and on that basis, I'll dismiss it as something else is going on, and I'll let somebody else deal with it. Now, last night, Soundly came on and he was chatting away, and basically he was absolutely resolute that it's the curve of the Earth and that we're all stupid to even think that it's anything else. And I was like, yeah, but Soundly, if that is the curve of the Earth, why is your model that's so predictable in its nature, and you all claim that it's predictable, why is it the predictability of your evidence and the model that you rely on fails to match my own evidence, of which we've got shitloads of it? And he was basically like, well, I don't know anything about your... And I was like, yeah, but that's fine, but this is at 30 miles. Yours is at 18. I said, on face value, there's a problem here because the tower should be like on the horizon and it shouldn't be protruding way up and beyond. And he simply would not address it. I kept trying to come back to it and he wouldn't address it.
Can you show those two images, Anthony? So your night shot of the tower with the unlit building beneath, which they're claiming is obstructed by curvature. Nonsense. Because while you're digging that out, I'll waffle a little bit. So to the right of the tower, you've also got the roller coaster, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is lit to within about, 30 metres off the ground?
235 feet off the ground.
Right, but how far down is it lit? I.e., how close to the ground is it lit?
I'll show you. You tell me how much you think we're looking at it, and I'll get you a comparison photo so you can see it. Am I sharing my screen right now? I don't think I am I?
Not yet.
All right, let me go back to the Skype window. There it is. And let's go to the plus. Share screens. Right, what I'll do is I'll share this one for the minute because this is the tower. This is the basis of my observations. Because it's tall enough. It's 518 feet tall. It's tall enough for it to pretty much disappear at 30 miles. But it's not that tall that it never disappears. It's a really good height for us to basically so we can calculate and interpret the evidence that we see. Now, I'd invited Mick West for a talk about his standard refraction, and courtesy of Mick West, this is his creation. He created what we should see of the tower at 30 miles away. Now, here's the problem. When we did get to 30 miles away, this is what we actually saw. So, look at. Oh, hang on. Let's try and get him back to it. The tower is just below the horizon, and the bulbous part of it is just protruding above it. And when we actually got there, that's what we're looking at. So according to Mick, the horizon should be up here. That's the bulbous part of the tower. That's the bit that should be on the horizon. But we're clearly seeing a lot more. Now, how much more is moot, because there's a light down here which we believe is the heart on the front of the tower itself. There's like an illuminated heart. I'll show you on a real picture in a minute. And we're seeing these two lights that are actually on the pier, the south pier, and these are lighting up.
Sorry, can you point out the heart again? Because my big ugly face was covering it. Brilliant.
The heart on the front of the tower, it faces west. We believe is this. It's either the heart or something else, but we think it's the heart. Okay. We know what these two lights are. These two lights are on the south pier. But let me just focus in on the roller coaster for a minute. The roller coaster is this light here. And when I zoom out a little bit, you can see that there's a triangular shape to the roller coaster, it is the roller coaster. But you can see its form. You can see that it's illuminating the form of the roller coaster itself. And so much so that we can see over on the far right, this looks like the mirror ball. There's been a debate over whether it's actually the mirror ball or not. But given that we can see pretty much down to the street level, it looks like we're looking at the mirror ball, and it lines up perfectly. Somebody said it's something else in the background. And for it to be something in the background, you have to look through the roller coaster. And I don't accept that we're looking through the roller coaster at this light. It looks like it's to the right of the roller coaster, and it matches perfectly with the mirror ball. And as far as I'm concerned, I accept this evidence as the mirror ball. So overall, in my opinion, this is the street level that we're looking at. And these two lights down here, not only are they below street level, they're on the pier. So if I just fire up, see, I've still got Soundly's video file up there from last night. I will fire up.
So this is it. I just want you to just leave that image just back on once more, just before you go back to it. Sorry, Anthony, to mess you around while you're looking for stuff. This image, yes. If you can just put it back up. So just again, explain exactly what that is, just so it's absolutely clear.
Right. What I'll do is I'll show you what it should look like, because for those that are not seeing this for the first time, most people know my position on this, but I need a browser, so give me a sec. I'll show you what it actually looks like in real world. Blackpool Tower at night, and then essentially it's, let's try if I can get that bigger. That's what we're looking at. There's the heart at the front, and it sits on the ballroom, but the ballroom itself is not illuminated. The lights that you see in the front here are the street lights, but the ballroom itself sits in blackness. It's not lit up. We believe this light is the one that's lit up here, and this is the other light that we thought might be, but it doesn't appear to be illuminated. But in any event, the tower sits on top of this thing. Now, when you go back to the image that we see, that's basically what we're looking at. So, I mean, the question that I would ask is, are we seeing the whole tower, which is what it's supposed to look like when we look at that picture? Now, my position is it's clearly the whole tower, because there's the heart at the front of it, which you clearly see here. This heart changes colour all the time. Sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's green, sometimes it's orange. Doesn't matter. But essentially, there's a really bright light here at the front. We believe it's this here. You don't really get much lower than that before you hit the building. So he said, and it's the whole tower. So when you go back to Mick West, who's created the other image for us to consider, I've gone off it, haven't I? The reality is we're left with a position where has it gone? I think I've lost it now. It might be. There we go. We're left in a position where that is not what we're seeing. We're seeing the whole tower, and that's what we're supposed to see, and Mick West has told us so. Yet Tim Osman says that's not important because he's not considered an authority, but he clearly is. Everybody refers to Metabunk as their go-to website for calculating the obscurity of buildings at distance. I mean, you tell me, does that look like it's even similar? And when we know that we're looking 200, I mean, there's 235 feet off the road height, and we're seeing the whole of the top of the roller coaster, and that's the height of the light at the very, very top. So when you see that there's a triangular structure around it that's consistent with the roller coaster, and then you see that this is the whole of you're looking pretty much at the beach. All right, the water itself's in the way, so you can't really see the beach because it's obviously not lit up. But there's enough information in the photo there to totally contradict that. And that's what we're supposed to see. Interestingly, in the hangout with Mick West, the only way that he could get above, or rather, the only way that he could create a flat Earth observation with this evidence was to raise his elevation up to 50 meters, 50 meters in height. And when he did that, that was what then we got the same information. Now, we didn't do 50 meters of observation, an elevation of 50 meters. We did an elevation literally on the sand. So, literally, what he's showing in this particular video is that as he changes his angle, I'm just trying to find where he actually does it. He changes it up to 50 meters to look behind the curve of the ball on Google Earth. Now, we know that Google Earth is based on the curve of a ball, but we can't get that imagery without, well, on the curve of but we can't get that imagery on the beach because the curve's supposed to be in the way.
Hey, Anthony.
Yo.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, man.
I was going to say, I spoke to this physicist the other day that is one of my clients, and I was talking.
I'm trying to get back to it, yeah.
Oh, by the way, Nathan, I have a friend in the chat named Sean Milano. He and I used to play music together a long time ago, like, I don't know, shit, like in the late 90s, and like 12 years passed, or 15 years, I think, even, and I haven't spoken to him in forever, and I see him on Facebook replying to, I think it was like Jeranism or something like that, or some kind of link, some kind of post, and I see his name, and I'm like, holy shit, I know that guy, like, he's an old friend of mine. I hadn't spoken to him in forever, found out he's a flat earther. He's actually in the chat right now, and he was at the Denver meetup with all those guys. I don't know. I watched a little bit of ODD's video of just him walking around, but I don't think he's got Skype. But anyway, what I was going to say was, this guy, he's a physicist. I did his car years ago, and back then I wasn't into flat Earth, but I was into, like, conspiracy aliens and that shit. So he pretty much put me in my place when it came to that stuff. And one thing he said 3 times over the course of our conversation was, interstellar space travel is impossible. It can't happen. Now, this is a guy with Q clearance. He's got a security clearance, top secret. I don't know if it's like, it's not that high. I know Q clearance isn't that crazy, but he works on phased array systems, radar systems for jet airplanes like F-15s, F-16s, that sort of thing. He builds the radar arrays that fit on the bottom of it so they can, like, see through the walls. Guy knows a lot. He teaches at one of the schools. He also works for the government, contracting work. So I bring up the flat Earth thing, and I'm telling him, this is huge. This is crazy. I wasn't sure how he was going to take me saying those words, and he didn't even, like, break, any stride. He just took it. He was like, yeah, I think I've heard a little bit about that. I was like, okay, so what do you think about that? Why can't we see any curvature? And he's like, well, the one test you could do definitively would it be to get something, a large, I don't know, piece of wood or something like a level, and put it on water and get it out to, like, if the ocean is too rocky, too lumpy to get it accurate, to do an accurate experiment. So he suggested a lake, and see if the ends of whatever this object is, this long level, something that floats. He said, if the end is 8 inches above the water, then there's a curve there. But if not, if it's just floating in the water, both ends are floating in the water, it's flat. He didn't argue the point at all. He didn't, like, tell me, like, oh, I know you're crazy or anything like that. He just kind of went along with it, and was, I didn't want to bug him too much about it because it's like his customer. And he did say a few interesting things about astronauts. He said astronauts that go up there never want to go back. That the ones that can reach low Earth orbit, because that's as far as they go, he said they don't go back because you can't sleep, apparently. You can't sleep because you see things through your eyelids. You see, like, atmospheric, like, rays or some shit like that. Like, you can see it through your eyes. I asked that. Oh, no. Well, I said to him because I didn't like the reply. I was like, that sounds like, just stuff, kind of like info. And I said to him, I was like, where did you hear that from? And he said, well, it's just known. So I was like, all right. Let me kind of shift the subject to just overall science and like what we hear is, is it all theory? Is it fact? And, what about he started talking about the double slit experiment and Schrodinger's cat, the cat in the box, 50-50 chance if it's alive or dead. And he explained the double slit experiment, and he said light is both a wave and a particle at the same time, and that it exists as both. A photon is both a wave and a particle. But I said, there's a lot of people involved in this, and he's like, yeah, it's I would expect there to be.
Do you think the reality is that when they say that the astronauts couldn't sleep, that it's because they've actually been exposed to the lie, and then they basically know that they have to lie from then until the day they die, and the guilt of it probably keeps them up at night?
Well, I said to him, well, how do you have a vacuum without a barrier? Like, how do you have a vacuum here and then normal atmosphere here? How does that happen from a physics point of view, from a physicist's point of view? And he's like, well, it just gets thinner and thinner as you go up, the higher you go. And I mentioned the Kármán line, and I felt like an idiot. I was like, 350,000 feet up in the air, and he's like, yeah, something like that, whatever it is. He's like, the moon landing wasn't real. And I was like, yeah, I know about that. I know about the moon. And he says the reason why it's not real is I'm getting feedback on someone.
Yeah, can you mute Anthony? I think you're causing a bit of feedback.
He said that the reason why the moon landing wasn't real was guys on their ham radios were picking up signals from whatever NASA was broadcasting. So whatever was shot up in the air was sending out some kind of signal, but where people were receiving the signal was all over the world, which makes me believe that, okay, that confirms the flatness, because everybody was receiving something from up high. They launched something up in the air, and I don't think they all, land in the water or land in the Atlantic Ocean, as we might think. I think they do shoot things up, and they get pretty high up, probably like 100 miles up or so.
Whilst we're talking about the moon, it's just worth mentioning that Gem Panda's brought out a video. It's like nearly a 2-hour-long documentary about how he believes and knows that we did go to the moon. Now, whether or not you agree or disagree we went to the moon, I think the guy needs to be credited for the fact that he's gone to some time. He's produced some really cool evidence that is persuasive for why he accepts that we went to the moon. So although Gem may be seen by some as being a bit of a troll and a bit of a this, that, and the other, the reality is he has got his own evidence that he accepts to be true. And that's only the same position that we've got. We've all got our evidence that we consider to be true. And he's done a video on it for about 2 hours worth. So if just go and have a look on his channel and just, even if you disagree, credit the guy with the
zero evidence that I couldn't, there's no way I believe that they got to the moon.
I agree entirely. But my point wasn't whether we went to the moon or not. My point was that Jem's showing his evidence to why he believes that we went to the moon, and on that basis, the guy should be credited because he believes it. So I mean, it's the same as us. We all believe different levels of evidence as well. So I don't agree with him, but at least he's showing why he believes that we did go to the moon. So all I'm saying is that the guy should be given some credit for showing his reasons and his evidence, because the video is really quite good, to be honest. Go and watch it and see what you think.
I think he's also the contrary type. He seems to be a contrarian in his ways, so to make a video like that. But I'll check it out, without a doubt.
He's not as bad as everyone says. The reality is, if you speak to Gem a reasonable way. He'll speak back a reasonable way. The problem is his tone volume, his tone switch, his tone dial goes really high if you start pushing him. You can just he's like a NASA control module. Press a couple of buttons and you can see Jem's tone just going. Ooh. It's quite funny, but I just think he should be credited. Even if we don't agree with him, I think it's cool that he's done his own explanation for why he accepts that we did go to the moon. That was all. It wasn't to say that we did go to the moon. I don't believe we did. But that's all that was.
I've been thinking lately that the moon is a lot bigger than we think it is, or what, these 30 miles big, or 40 miles in diameter. So that's about the top of New Jersey. The top part of New Jersey is about 40 miles across. And I think it's bigger.
I actually think that the moon is proof and evidence of creation. I think that by grand design, however it's done, that's the designer or the creator's way of saying, hey, science, explain this. Because the moon itself is, for me, it's totally devoid of credible evidence to explain what it is, how it works, why we never see the other side of it. We only ever see one side. And that, for me, tidal locking is completely nonsense. This tidal locking fiction that they talk about in science, yeah, I understand what they're talking about. But let's be honest, it's supposed to have resulted from an impact with Earth trillions of years ago. And are you telling me that it's just happened to fall in a perfect orbit and it happens to be perfect? No, there is the chances of that being the case is zero. You are never, ever going to get a perfect tidal locking explanation by the result of an impact. It's ridiculous. It has to be, for me, the only interpretation of the moon is when you look up at it, it's proof of creation. And that's the way I believe that flat earthers should look at it, because science can't explain it. There's no credible evidence to it. I mean, just ask yourself the question, what's the moon made of? Moon rocks? I mean, what do we know?
It's not made of what they say it's made of. That it just doesn't seem like that to me. It seems like to me it's more of a cellular thing, like it has an effect on our body. Have you ever had your chart read, your astrological chart read properly?
Well, I know I'm a Libra, and I know that a Libra's got a strong sense of justice. But other than that, no, I don't know anything about the star signs, because I don't believe the star signs have got anything.
I don't know that much either, but two people read it, and someone read it, and she explained it to me, and she was talking about, I was like, well, how does this affect my life immediately? Because it's very specific, too. That's what blew me away, how specific it was. She said, well, sometimes when your moon, because the moon causes a lot of trouble in your body, or changes. In other words, if I was planning on having surgery in 2 days, and the moon was in a certain phase, or crossing this, you have to look at the charts to understand what I'm talking about. If it was in a certain place, it has an effect on our lymphatic system. Like, this is, proven to be true, that, you could be in for, like, you may not survive something might go wrong. Something's prone to go wrong. And if you look at a eukaryotic cell, which is how they, if you look at a close-up of the moon, it looks like there are, they're called, I forgot what they're called. They're like striations. It looks like a little star, but it's got like thin, like webbing sort of to it. Some parts look like it's glass and you can see through it. And like there's different levels. Let me show you a picture of this guy.
Just while you're looking for a picture, you mentioned the word lunatic. Obviously, the word lunatic comes from lunar. And if you speak to any cop, most cops have got the perception that there is a lot more crime when there's a full moon than there is when there's no moon or half a moon or some other degree. Full moons create lunatics for some reason. And any cop will tell you the truth. Any cop will tell you that. It appears to be the case that the lunar cycle causes crime when it's a full moon. It's just an interesting observation that seems to correlate correctly all over the earth. So if you do know any cops, ask them, is there any truth to it? It does appear to be the case that lunacy is there's a correlation with lunacy at full moon times. Have you got your imagery?
Oh shit, I just found a picture of someone that apparently got a shot of the ISS or whatever it is up there. The ISS. Fucking ISS. I just watched that movie The Martian.
Oh yeah.
Matt Damon.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
Which ISS talk.
It's brilliant. I love that movie.
It was, yeah. His part was good. His survival, that story was cool of how he worked that out. And then there was another movie called Life with Jake Gyllenhaal. It's kind of like a horror movie. Like they find some life on Mars, and it looks like a starfish, almost like a single cell organism that runs crazy on the ship and kills everybody. I love those kind of movies. Okay, share. Here we go. This photo right here is. This is, I think, my friend Cass, who I know on Facebook. He took this picture. Let me make it a little bit bigger. That make it bigger? That make it bigger?
Yeah, it does make it a little bit bigger. Yeah, go on.
So this was these are stills from a video.
A video that he took himself?
Yeah.
I've got similar footage that my friend took himself.
It was all lit up and like sparkling.
See, the thing is, this is what's really interesting because I've got similar footage on my phone of my mate's telescope taking the same kind of thing. And this is how I got my first ever hangout. I messaged Red's Rhetoric and I asked him, like, could he explain this? This is a real photo on my phone that my mate took of the ISS. How does that look like the International Space Station? And he basically sent me a link back. And before I knew it, I was in and amongst 5 or 6 ball earthers, like likes of Halsoy and a few other microbloganism and a few other bits and pieces. And it was like I walked in there, and it was like I was in a grave, and they were all mourning me, my loss, and they were all looking down into the grave, and I'm up there going, "Oh shit, what am I doing?" And the reality was, they absolutely ripped me, but they destroyed me. But I didn't even know what I was going into. But he used my evidence against me. He said, I asked him, could he explain how this could possibly be the ISS? And essentially, he managed to get the exact perfect orientation. And it was like he twisted it round and got it into like, it was kind of like that. And then basically he said to me, he said, do you accept that that's exactly the way that your photo is? And I looked at it and I was like, shit. And for 6 months, I actually thought the ISS might be real because he was able to demonstrate it on a 3D model showing exactly what I expected it to, my own evidence to be what it was. And I was like, oh my God. But then obviously it took me 6 months to work out that it can't possibly be real. But nonetheless, in that period, I actually had real serious doubts about the ISS, whether it could be real or not. But it looks holographic, in my opinion. It looks as though it's being projected from a plane from behind that we can't see moving. I don't know. It's weird. I don't get how they're doing it. I'll be honest. I can't explain what they're doing to make it look like there's the ISS up there. But I don't believe it's. I don't believe it's a tin can full of people floating around in space. I believe it's literally something completely different. But I have to stick myself on mute a sec.
I don't know. I've seen other pictures of it, and there probably is a structure. I don't think it's floating. I don't really know what it's doing, but it seems to me like, we can send balloons to low Earth orbit, right? We can send balloons 25 miles up. That's no big deal. I think the way of the dirigible is how they've been doing it forever. Like the Hindenburg, those sorts of things, like blimps and helium, because it doesn't take much to get them up there.
I always find with the helium, when they put the weather balloons up, I always find that it's one of the biggest questions that nobody ever asks. What causes the balloon to burst? Does it get pulled from the outside? Does it
expand? The helium expands and there's no release. I've seen balloons where there are release valves, not valves, but there are areas where there's like pockets or circles that release the helium. Because I asked the guy that, I was like, well, if I wanted to put a balloon, send a balloon up there, how could I get it so it doesn't burst? And he was saying you'd have to have a bigger balloon. That's first of all. The higher you want to get it, the bigger it has to be.
Wouldn't you just have to put a pressure relief valve in it so that once it gets to a certain PSI, it just exhausts?
Yeah, you could do that too. But remember, then you're going to start cutting back on its upward ascent. The ones that are in the ones that the guys in Operation Manhigh used, those were, huge. It took like 5 people just to pick the thing up. One of them weighed like 2 tons, and it rolled out for like 100 feet, like 100 yards or something like that. And those were that was like a ball that was inflated draped with a cloth, draped with like a cloth on the outside, then tied into a knot at the bottom. And that thing, when they released it, it shot up in the air, and it took the guy up, and he got up, Joseph Kittinger, and he got. Did you see that movie, Spaceman?
No.
Oh, that's necessary watching. Without a doubt, that's necessary, because that shows what the Air Force was doing prior to NASA, the inception of NASA in '58. NASA, once they appeared on the scene, all the funding was taken away. And these guys were genuine scientists who just wanted to find out what was up there, and if man could exist or breathe or whatever, what the oxygen supply was like, how it was going to affect the body. And they were doing tests on like a shoestring budget. They had this like telephone booth looking thing, contraption with like tubes and all this shit, and oxygen. And they had successful experiments. But the guy who jumped out I think he was 19 miles up or 20 miles. He had the highest jump prior to, what's his face? Bamberger's, whatever his name is. The Red Bull guy.
How high Felix Baumgartner.
Right.
How high did he get in his balloon on that?
I think like 23. But
23.
This guy got 108,000 feet. The footage is amazing too, because he jumps right out. He just falls forward, and the camera's still watching him as he falls through like the cloud cover. And you see like it's flat everywhere, of course.
Have you come across that evidence? Sorry, go on.
I was gonna say it's on my YouTube channel.
All right, okay, I'll check it.
I uploaded the whole thing. It's 45 minutes long. It's really cool. It shows how they made the balloons, the technology behind them, how they got the funding to do it. It's a really cool story. It was before everything got taken away and science became this whole PR system, which is NASA. NASA is the biggest PR machine.
Deception, yeah, I agree. Do you remember the Operation High Jump and the Operation Fishbowl era, where they were doing all the Antarctica stuff? Around that same time, I read something that basically it was NASA trying to nuke shit out of the moon, and apparently they were trying to nuke it because they realized that it was close. And I read something that said the moon rang like a bell for like 3 days after this impact of this nuclear bomb. Have you ever come across that?
Yeah.
Have you heard of it?
About a long time.
It's just more NASA propaganda, though.
Yeah.
Maybe, but I mean, it indicates that the moon. Well, I don't know. It may well be true. I mean, we don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting if it was true, because
I have this feeling that the moon is not that difficult to get to. That it's got to be local, and
I
that
agree.
if I had the technology, I wouldn't use a rocket. That's for sure. I would use a dirigible, a balloon. That's how you get up to space. And if you ask me, that's how you get to space, not rockets.
But can you imagine if you did get to the moon? Because the moon has to be up, doesn't it? In terms of, it can't be down. It has to be up. You know, like they say in space, there is no up or down in space. Well, if you can get to the moon with a balloon, in theory,
I've heard about that is that when you're in space, whatever the largest body or the thing you're closest to is under your feet. In other words, if you're in space and you're passing by Mars, Mars now becomes downward.
yeah.
So Earth will always be down, and basically you fall towards it. So we're looking down at the sun or something like that. We look down at things.
Can you imagine if you did get into a balloon and you did go up to the moon, and the moon was up and stayed up all the time? It was just a different, like, you may not get, you'd have to kind of like the balloon would be, the moon would be over here, and by the time you get up to it, you'd have to work it out so that you kind of like,
You'd have to control it. You'd have to be able to control the vessel that you're in.
Can you imagine if you actually did get anywhere near the moon and you were close enough to be able to say, I got closer than anybody else to the moon, and it was still up. It wasn't anything other than up. It wasn't this 3-dimensional floaty around in space thing where you have no orientation of what position. It was still up. You have to get up to the moon. That would be a really interesting concept, because that's potentially attainable. We may be able to do that. We'll have to have a word at IPS and see if you can source out funding for it.
Fucking penguins everywhere.
Yeah. Send a couple of penguins up there and see if they come back with a different timestamp, like on Back to the Future.
I think, it takes, like a couple of propellers, some fans or something like that to move it forward, to get lateral trajectory.
Yeah, but you also need to be light enough, because obviously as you go higher and higher, your environment gets less dense and less dense. You become relatively heavier than what you were when you set off. So you need to compensate that heaviness. You become an anchor. You start off as like a ship that you can thrust up or whatever, fan yourself up or whatever. But once your relative environment that you're in becomes that less dense than what it was, you're going to become a weight. You're going to become really heavy relative to the environment you're in. So you're going to need an awful lot of energy to be able to break that weight that you are now an anchor. You're getting exponentially heavier as you're trying to gain in elevation, which is why I believe they can't get beyond a certain height. No matter how much money they spend, no matter how much fuel tanks they've got, they can only get so high because the weight of the thing becomes relatively that heavy that they can't move it anymore. It literally comes straight back down again.
Well, the Earth is the floor of the universe. So wherever we go, it's always going to be underneath us. I do think that there's a certain point where whatever it is that we're composed of, whether it's waves, particles, atoms, atom in Greek means thing you can't split. So you can't split an atom. So whatever it is we're comprised of.
I'm not feeling as cool as you look at the minute, so I've had to put my sunnies on to raise the stakes a little bit.
Oh my god.
So basically the things that hold us together, we're composed as people, like, in this flesh bag kind of thing, because we're so close to the Earth. But I think once we get to a point where we're so far away from it, we eventually start to decompose and start to come apart, unwind or burst into we turn into air particles, like a cloud of dust.
Just as a complete distraction altogether, I've had Sean Hufford, one of my biggest haters. He's asked me would I do a parody with him, just because I've tried to make friends with a few ballers, because I don't like the idea that everybody hates each other. There's no reason for anybody to hate each other in this discussion. So I collaborated with Sean. He asked me would I do a parody, and I said sure. I said, what do you want me to do? And he wanted me to basically play the air guitar for a particular song. So I said, okay, fine, send it over and I'll do it. What's the context? He told me the context, and I basically said, fine, I'll do it, whatever. Anyway, the idea behind it was, I think he's taking the piss out of anybody that monetizes their account, because anyone that monetizes their account instantly becomes somebody that's orientated about taking money. And I'm not sure who he's aiming it at specifically, but I think he's aiming it one of them's Thrive. But I don't know. I'm not. He won't tell me too much about it. But he got me to do this, and I just said, fine, whatever. I'm not bothered. So I did it, and I'm hoping that it's not going to be a backfiring thing. But this is the wig that I had to wear, the sunnies on, and basically I was trying to be a rock star. So when he eventually releases this parody video, which he's been working on for weeks, I'm hopefully going to be part. I mean, it's only going to be about 30, maybe 20 seconds worth of a clip, but nonetheless, it's going to be somewhat interesting that there's an overlap between ballers and flats that we shouldn't be fighting with each other. No matter, even if we disagree, we shouldn't be fighting, and there shouldn't be that resentment and scorn between both sides of the discussion, because the way I see it, they don't know any more than we don't know. They don't know anything. We don't know anything. And on that basis, it's all about the evidence that we accept to be true. So essentially, I just said, yeah, sure, let's do it. Let's just show that ballers and flats can work together, and hopefully it's not going to be a mistake, but we'll see. So in the next maybe week or so, just keep your eye on Sean Hufford's channel, because you should see something interesting, whatever it's going to end up being. I haven't even seen it yet. I don't think he's finished it, but
that's what I've been saying for the past month. I've been saying that no one can prove anything to anybody. It's all going to come from you or me or Nathan or whoever is listening. You find out your own truth by being honest with yourself. If it makes sense to you, it'll it'll end up your own personal truth. But I was talking to Jed Skeptic Media. I was saying, hey, that's what you believe. You believe it's a globe. I don't. I believe it's flat. And there's no reason why we can't get along. We should be just asking for more evidence, and just, it should be like we're seeking the truth with this. It's like, well, you might think it's a globe. Well, let's see if we can put our heads together and figure out what's really going on. Because the globe should be dead set on like, well, that's science. That's it. It's a wrap. Everything they say is true. No.
What on earth is that noise in the background?
It's a fucking leaf blower.
Fuck.
My least favorite.
Sounds like NASA's taking off in your next door neighbour's garden.
It's the worst.
I suggested Jem should monetize his video that he's just come out with. I mean, the amount of work he put into it. Again, you gave him big props earlier, and I totally agree. I mean, he did so much work on it. And like every single time I have to detail anything to do with the trolls, they're useful. And all Jem has done is given everybody the standard, accepted narrative, the version of events, what I call the heliocentric smear of bullshit. That's what he's given people. And the reality with anything NASA related is there's always an explanation, and it will always make sense. You can quantify it in lots of different ways. And I think that we're in this little corner of the internet. We discussed this earlier about having the information out there to be ridiculed. Maybe that's what we're here for. Doesn't matter how good our information is, if we're kept in this tiny little corner of the internet, and it's people, again, like you mentioned earlier, like IPS, who are actually getting the message out there. Massive, great big billboards with it on is something that they probably haven't accounted for happening.
Well, yeah, I think that NASA will always give a plausible excuse for anything that people challenge them with. But I also think that NASA can say literally the sky's yellow and blue, green, any colour they want. NASA will say anything. And there are dickheads out there that are so... Red's rhetoric. NASA could tell Red's rhetoric to put his hand in a fire, and he'll do it because he believes them so much. He doesn't challenge or criticise anything that they say, because to him, NASA is God. So ultimately, if you've got that level of indoctrination with even a small section of your fans, you're going to get them small section of your fans to preach the word for you. And that's what NASA have. Flat Earth doesn't have that. Flat Earth doesn't have anybody that's like Red's, where he'll put his hand in a fire. We're all critical and think, well, yeah, that makes sense. Maybe it's true. We'll go with it, because unless there's evidence to the contrary, it could well be true. But NASA boys, they could say that the sky's green and everyone will accept it, because that's the way that NASA are. They're seen as being so credible and so perfect, yet they never get challenged by their own people. I think it's
you're
crazy.
Right. I mean, that's because you're absolutely right in your analogy calling them God. Ultimately speaking, they have a belief-based system. This is what it's all about. They can't verify what they're being told by NASA. That's the bottom line. So they are taking it on faith. Therefore, NASA is their God. That's the only way to put it.
Now, the question, I mean, how many NASA fanboys are there out there that would actually put their hand in a fire if they said it would work? You know what I mean? Most of them would do it. Yeah, it's okay, it'll work, you'll not get burnt. And they do it anyway and get burnt. And it's like, well, honestly, it's so many people would accept, without any question whatsoever, any reasonable or logical explanation for a discrepancy or an anomaly. And it's ridiculous. I mean, did I show you that? Have I showed you that that thing, that picture on NASA's website where they've literally started putting half the globe into the picture and then forgot about the rest of it? Did you see that?
No, show us.
Oh man, it's hilarious.
Okay. No one can ever answer the question of why the fuck the horizon looks so different when it's on when NASA's presenting an image than when we have a balloon footage shot. It's like, well, the conversation stops right there. It doesn't go forward anymore until that's figured out. Like, what the fuck? And they're not fisheye lenses either. This is just Photoshop bending, alterations and shit.
I'm just trying to find where it is I saved it, so just bear with me a sec.
The only trouble is we're selecting, when you talked about the moon ringing earlier and you're saying maybe it's got a bit of credibility to it, well, we're kind of, again, we're being selective about which evidence we reject from NASA and which ones we accept, and we just can't do that. You know, you can throw the baby out with the bathwater and just say, yeah, all nonsense. Well, at least I think you can.
Yeah, I do agree, but I would like to challenge it into. I mean, yeah, we could discredit it, not discredit it. We could dismiss it straight away, but I'd like to dismiss it with credible evidence to the contrary. I mean, wouldn't it be cool if somebody actually did fire a missile up to the moon and it hit the moon, bounced off it, and it didn't, and whatever it did, it would be like shit. So it is actually a physical object. I don't know. It's one of those things that we should be able to. I mean, we should be able to do stuff with the moon. I mean, it's not that far away for us to rule it out as completely unobtainium.
According to their science, that missile would have to travel 240,000 miles.
Yeah, we know that it's not nowhere near that, don't we? Though.
I remember seeing a comedy skit where the comedian was joking, and it was when they were doing that exact experiment, firing a bomb at the moon, and he said it about 1 million times because it's like, why would you want to mess with it? They tell us that the moon controls our tides, obviously in the heliocentric system. It may very well be the case in the flat Earth system, for all I know. But would you want to mess with that? Would you want to start interfering with it if you knew that it actually did have an effect on your everyday life in terms of things like the tides?
Which is why I wonder whether Operation Fishbowl has got any credible... why would you be trying to blow fuck out of the firmament or the dome or whatever it is that they were trying to blow fuck out of? Why would they do that if they knew that if they did blow a hole in it, we would all probably die? Why would you do that?
Well, you wouldn't. That's the bottom line. So I just think it's just same as anything else we get today. It's fear-based mind control. You know, the fact that they're using it to prop up the heliocentric system is neither here nor there. It's no different to saying that whatever terror attack, I don't watch the news these days, whatever the most recent terror attack is, it's the same principle. You know, there's going to be a certain number of comedians, like back then, the one I was describing, wish I knew his name, that are going to turn around and say, we're all doomed. And we're not.
You and I maybe wouldn't blow shit out of it, but if there are psychopathic people that are in control in places of power where they shouldn't be, would you trust somebody else with with the magic button or whatever if they thought, I wonder what would happen if we fired a missile up at that? I wouldn't.
They said it rang like a bell, then it rang like a gong.
I think the phrase was it rang like a bell for about 3 days. And I've also seen something where they were talking about it was either the sun or the moon, I can't remember which, but it appeared for 2 or 3 days. It appeared that there was like a finger that was like a projector peeping out from the top of it, so that it kind of looked like something was projecting an image down there. And I don't know what I can't remember where I seen it, but apparently there's reports of weird things happening. It was just really interesting evidence, whether it's real or not. It was just interesting that somebody would document it in such a weird way. But with regard to that, the image of NASA trying to show... Oh, I know where I can find it. It'll be in the chat. So, yeah, you'll have to give me a sec while I find it.
Yeah, no worries. Did you have any other interesting conversations with your man you were talking about earlier, Jonathan?
Well, the most important thing he said was that interstellar space travel is impossible. And this is coming from a guy who knows a lot about airplanes. He knows a lot about flight. He knows a lot about, government, black projects and stuff. He can't really talk about all of them, but he mentioned enough to me to give me the impression that he was pretty certain about this. Like, interstellar space travel is impossible. Like, we can't leave.
So what? No Voyager? Oh no.
Like, nothing can get out there. Nothing. No Cassinis, no probes, none of that shit. And I had to, be careful. I didn't want to bug him about this. Because it's one of those things where someone's being nice and, entertaining it, and then it gets to the point where you start to turn into, uber flat earther on them. You start forcing proofs on them. Which to me is all you need is one proof. Because that's technically, if this proves it, then it proves it. You don't need 3, 4, 5. It's like there's no curvature. There's no ball. The only reason why we think it's a ball is because of globes. Nobody thinks it's a sphere because of actual physical, tangible evidence, something you could touch, look at, see with your own eyes. It's all coming from a screen, all these images. The ground's always there. It's always in front of you, no matter what. No matter if you're in a plane, how fast you're going, the ground's always going to produce itself right in front of you.
Yeah, everything beyond that is taken on faith.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's always going to be, it's always flat. I mean, I have Dave Murphy in one of his videos said that he could see the Manhattan skyline from Route 17. When he made that comment, I was like, I didn't know who he was back like 2 years ago. That was one of the first videos I watched. And I was like, that guy just, that where he was talking about, where he made that observation is like 10 minutes away from me. And I didn't know that he used to live around here. He used to live a few towns over. And I've been, you know, I could see I've been up there a million times on Route 17. It's a big hill that you drop down. And while you're going down the hill, the skyline looks like it's higher up than the tree line that's in front of you. It's really, you know, it doesn't make any sense. Technically, airplanes should be flying off the side of the globe. That's another thing that I've always said. You know, due east will get you, it won't get you around the world. Due east gets you out towards space. Because there's no true, like, east-west. None of this shit makes sense.
You do get to the point where you're unable to distinguish the bullshit from the lies and the deceits and the real. What does it really look like when they go as high as what they tell us? We can't even ascertain the shape of the Earth, and they can get high enough to be able to do it. But why is it even a debate? Why can't they just show us what it really looks like? Unedited footage, point it backwards. Let's see what happens when the rocket goes as high as it goes, and let's just see what happens. Because they must be able to get high enough. The only conclusion you can logically come to when you apply the logic and reason formula for the evidence that they give us is that they can't get high enough. It's the only thing that you can perceive. Oh, I'm just looking for this guy's comment. I can't remember where it's gone.
Did you guys see the video Mark Sargent put up? Yeah, I'm sure it was a mirror, but of a 6-year-old that was basically saying it's all fake. That was a flat Earth video. It's like, after that comment from you, Anthony, it's very appropriate. Maybe she's ahead of her time.
Yeah, certainly is. No, I haven't actually seen that particular video. No, I'm just I really want to show.
NASA's not just like if you go to NASA down in Florida, like if you go to Cape Canaveral, they're launching rockets. That's for sure. They're launching things up. I've seen them with my own eyes. It is real. You know, there are a lot of people working for NASA that are doing things that believe whatever they believe. These large machines, these satellites they believe they're going somewhere.
Yeah, but that was my next question. No, I accept that they are launching real rockets at times. But my question is, well, what happens to them once they go beyond our vision to see? Because they always go off over the Pacific Ocean. I believe that the rockets literally they go up, they burn up all the fuel, and they come straight back down again, land in the Pacific, destroy themselves on impact, sink, never to be seen again. That's what I honestly.
You know, and they're hard to see. You know, it's like the size of an airplane with the wings off. Take the wings off of an airplane, stand it on its back, on its tail. That's a rocket. You know, like look up in the sky. When an airplane is probably about 30,000, it's really hard to make it out. And once it gets over the cloud cover, you can't see it anyway. It doesn't even matter. It could be like flashing. It could be lit up. It, you know, wouldn't matter.
I actually think that the idea that a rocket could take off and then land back on its launch pad is ridiculous, because I don't think they've got the ability to control it.
Complete fucking bullshit.
Yeah, I think so too.
Just look at the video, and the fucking thing is, I need like a cylindrical. Here, I have a vacuum extension that I can use as a display. Because what the angle at which that ridiculously stupid dildo rocket is doing makes no sense. It's doing this, coming down, and then all of a sudden straightening out and landing. You know, like once you're doing this, it's always going to go like that. It's always going to tip over. You can't do that.
No.
With what, those two little wings? Fucking SpaceX. They obviously shot it up in the air, then reversed the footage. That's my best guess.
Yeah, that's what I think they've done as well. But what's then interesting is how they got the smoke to work, because the smoke doesn't look like it's been done in reverse. It looks like they've done two layers. It looks like they've done a layer where it's taken off and a layer where it's being reversed, and they've overlapped the two somehow. It is quite important. I always notice that when it lands, it never lands close to you. It takes off close to you, so you can see it and you can go, wow. It disappears into the night sky. And then there's a really key piece of the evidence that's missing then, and that's called the continuity of evidence. The continuity of evidence is not there. So that which you see go up doesn't mean it's the same thing coming back down. And I haven't ruled out the idea that they're coming down with some kind of fan-propelled balloon thing that's like a drone, but it looks like a rocket, but they're telling us it is the rocket, and it's not close enough for you to be able to work out that it's not. So it looks like it's the same thing, but they're just bringing it back down with a remote control. That, to me, looks like what it is.
Just look at what we were watching on The Martian. All that shit. Look, the CGI was amazing.
Yeah, I agree. The CGI on The Martian looks better than anything that NASA's produced.
You know, it looked perfect. I mean, if that's that believable, then, you know, it's crapshoot. You can't figure out what. You know, no one can tell real from. And I don't think NASA's stupid. I think that they're putting these clues out there. So I think they're doing these things as a distraction. Like when people's hands disappear and all that nonsense. I think they want us to be focusing on, or they want the media, people online to be watching and getting caught up in the fakery. Just because it doesn't matter anymore. They've already been found out. So now it's just, you know, keep everyone thinking about that while we go do this other thing, so no one wanders.
I actually think that they're laughing at us. I don't think that they're doing any credible work by them anymore, because I reckon they've kind of learned pretty much everything. Say like 90% of all the known knowledge that we can get in their opinion, and they've kind of stopped. And now they've got to the point where they're thinking, right, I'm bored now. What should I do? Let's just put out a video and see if they can work it out, and then we'll do something deliberately to see whether anyone spots it, and they get away with it because no one spots it. And then they think, right, okay, let's push the boat out a bit further. Let's try doing this and see if anyone spots it. We don't spot it. And then the third video they put out, someone spots it, but he's the minority view and nobody really listens to him. So they think, well, okay, so even when they spot it, no one's able to do anything about it because the majority rule, the consensus is that we are doing credible work. So he's discredited on the grounds that he's a nobody. So let's push it out a bit. And I actually think that you look at those ISS, these astronauts, they literally are laughing at us. It's not smiling because they're dead excited. They're taking the piss. That's the way I interpret their behavior. But I mean, obviously, who am I to question their behavior? I have never been to space, etc. But the reality is they are not laughing with us at all. They are literally laughing at us. And some of the things that they do, I just think to myself, if it was a flat earther doing that and they spotted these mistakes, it would literally be laughed at. The ballers would laugh at it ridiculously. But for some reason, when NASA do it, they kind of skim over it and just ignore it.
I've got to disagree with you. I'm really sorry to be like the naysayer in this conversation, but I have to disagree. I mean, have you guys watched, I think his name, I keep getting his name wrong. I think it's Dilly Gill. He's the guy who showed the space shuttle to be a zero-G plane. Is that a familiar one on you guys?
I've seen the space shuttle.
Because what he basically was showing was that NASA have always been on the cutting edge of videography. They are right up there, way ahead of Hollywood in terms of the techniques and productions that they're using and the equipment that they're using. They are definitely ahead of the curve. Now, that being said, he also pointed out that they never overplay their hand. In other words, they try and keep it simple. So when they showed the first zero-G meal, it's basic. It's not like they're using fire extinguishers in space like in Gravity. They've very much played their a smaller hand, a lesser hand than they could, just to keep it simple. And I think when you look at things like, now the hype's down a little bit, but the GeoShifter video that he showed, the guy literally behind the model, like a guy dressed in black. Well, I think that's a flaw with the abilities of the technology of the day that is now more obvious. And the most obvious example of that is the moon landings. When they faked that, they weren't faking it to try and get caught. They absolutely wanted it to be as realistic as possible. And it's only when you go back now with much more modern techniques that you can really spot how poor it is, because it looks like an old-fashioned movie. And I think as things progress, a lot of people in Flat Earth are looking at stuff that's probably 5 years old, that's on the ISS. And that stuff is of an older ilk in terms of the technology they're using. And it is easier to spot some of the fakery. And it's even easier when you have people like Dilly Gill, if I've got his name right, showing you how they've mapped the CGI. They're literally using zero-G planes to figure out how water, creating a sphere, falls. It ties all together really nicely when you have people presenting these arguments. Well, you can't say water doesn't curve, because what about raindrops? They fall in a perfect circle. It's like, yeah, don't they just? NASA have filmed them on a zero-G plane with very limited time frames and have now mapped the whole thing so that they can present it in a studio rather than going anywhere for the ISS. I mean, these are links that I haven't put together. You'll have to watch Dilly Gill's videos. I'll put a link in the description below so anyone can subscribe to him. I lost several days twice watching his videos, so I watched them all and then went back and just watched them all again a few weeks later. But awesome, in terms of what he's putting out there. But just to round this out, and why I'm disagreeing with you, he seems to be postulating that they are absolutely trying to do it as perfectly as humanly possible, as opposed to trying to slip stuff in to get caught. I just don't think that's the case.
I think that there was a time when the space race was on, when they needed to appear to be credible, then they had to make it look real. But now I don't think that they need to appear to be credible, and I actually think that they are deliberately planting mistakes just to see which ones get spotted and how it's reacted by. Because I don't believe they're trying to I don't believe they're trying to recreate a fantasticness anymore. I believe that they were doing it at one point. But look at it, some of the stuff that they're doing now is just laughable. Although on saying that, the ISS footage has improved greatly because it's now got HD cameras and stuff, and that's a lot harder to fake. But nonetheless, when you're looking out that little capsule part of the ISS and you're looking out the windows, that still looks fake. Doesn't look real, in my opinion. So
but it looks fake to who? That's a subjective term. So
sure.
Looks fake to me. Definitely looks fake to you. I agree. But you're dealing with it daily. The people who are saying, nah, that doesn't look fake. And what they do is, it's back to the heliocentric smear of bullshit. They'll give you an explanation like Jem Panda has done with the moon.
Yeah, I mean, I've only got halfway through Jem's video. I've not got to the part where I've seen all the clips where he shows like real moon footage, apparently, real moon photography. But essentially, so the stuff I've seen so far is really well put together. But it is like rhetoric. I've not actually seen real evidence yet that's persuasive, but I have seen parts of it that when he was producing it that really were persuasive. But I haven't got to that part yet in the thing. But yeah, I agree. Jem's done a really cool video, but at the moment, certainly the first 20 minutes of it that I'm up to, it's not really, it hasn't showed anything really cool other than the basic facts and the official narrative. But it's still worth watching.
I still see that as very cool, because what he's doing, it's the same principle as when you came back from your holiday and said, I think I found curvature. And it's a route into showing people, this is how we can be deceived. And you've got to have somebody actually in the moment, in the deception, showing the people why. This is why Jem has been deceived. Laid out bare. And the same applied when you showed curvature with a shorter focal length camera. It portrayed how the deception works. And I've been saying this for ages. If you've got people like Sly Sparkane, who they're not necessarily perpetrating any deception as far as they're concerned. They are, obviously. But they're telling you or illustrating to you how the deception actually works. And I think that's cool.
I actually think Sly knows it's not a ball. I believe he's totally dishonest. I don't believe that guy's clearly intelligent and he can make videos good. And when you get somebody that is intelligent, that understands physics and can make videos, and he spouts some of the rhetoric that he spouts, you have to ask the question, is he doing this intentionally or is he totally brainwashed and he can't see it? Because it's extreme. He's either a massive victim, and I don't believe he is a massive victim, or he's literally brainwashed. He's literally being fraudulent, because I don't believe that Sly's not worked out that it's not a ball. The absence of curve is paramount to it, and I don't believe he's not seen it himself. So I know
I can totally buy that. I mean, you were there, I was there, Jonathan was there. We've all been there. Just because, but if you look into the standard rhetoric, you're going to be convinced because it is very convincing. And when they tell you how convincing it is, you can't just say to yourself, "I don't believe you. There's no way you're convinced by this." Because I think they are. I don't doubt for a second that they believe it.
Well, on the flip side of it, I mean, I had a disagreement with Jem, and the disagreement was over the 24-hour Antarctic sun. We know that evidence does not exist, and we know that it can't exist because they show the sun setting, which apparently is not able to happen on the heliocentric model. But the sun, like Jeren says, the sun always sets in Antarctica. Can't do it in summer. So in summer, the sun has to not set. And that's the reason why the 24-hour Antarctic sun doesn't exist, that video evidence. But when I spoke to Jem about it, and I said, Jem, do you not see that the missing hours of footage there, even if it's only 3 hours, but it's believed to be generally 5 or 6, maybe 7 hours, that missing footage is paramount. It's crucial. And, well, I don't believe it is. Well, why not?
Because he's been told it's not important. That's why.
Yeah, but why does he not realise that missing evidence is important? It's like not having an alibi when there's a dead body.
Mark Twain, man. It's easier to convince people that they've been... It's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled.
Yeah, so pride kicks in to some degree.
Yeah, basically. It's the heliocentric smear of bullshit that we were all subjected to. We all, us on this panel, saw through it. Some people don't. Yeah. And I don't know, like I keep saying, I find it fascinating and useful to hear them lay out in no uncertain terms why they're convinced by it. And yeah, you can point out to them all day, well, you're ignoring evidence, you're ignoring the holes in the evidence, you're presenting fallacious evidence, you're presenting belief-based evidence, and they'll just disagree with you. I mean, that's why I harped on about it earlier with the Midwest Tower thing. You know, you've got, it's as plain as day. You can't deny it. There's the whole tower, and they will deny it. It's cognitive dissonance. We have this conversation off air all the time, Anthony, because I say it every time. You'll go, there's no way, this guy knows. And I'm like, cognitive dissonance, every time.
But the funny thing is, though, I was literally soundly criticising me of obfuscation last night, and he said that word about 6-7 times, and in the end, it was the reason why I kicked him out, because he was pissing me off. But basically, the word obfuscation means deliberately being... awkward or deliberately being vague. And I'm like, no, I'm not obfuscating by pointing out that there is no curvature there. The problem is you refuse to address why the curve isn't where it's meant to be. And that's the problem. But he was deflecting it by saying that I'm obfuscating. And I'm like, no, I'm not obfuscating at all. You're failing to deal with the evidence the way the evidence demands that you deal with it. You have to address where the curve is and why it isn't there. And he cannot see it or refuses to. So either way, he's either brainwashed or he's off his head. Yeah, he's either lying, mistaken, or wrong.
Well, there is another... Because he tried to explain it away. So he was saying, I am seeing curvature. The building that isn't lit and is impossible to see is being obscured. So in other words, he put his own little heliocentric smear of bullshit on top of your evidence. But it didn't matter how many times you flicked... I was in the chat going... Put up the Metabunk version again, you know, show him again, because it was just hysterical from the chat. It was really funny.
But what he was actually doing there by saying that the ballroom could not be seen, therefore it's unclear, what he's doing is distracting from the issue in the hope that counter challenge will be in some way accepted as a valid criticism. And I'm like, no, where's the curve? Why is the curve not? Because at the end of the day, their model is proclaimed to be reliable and predictable. It always does what they want it to do. And I'm like, yeah, okay, so if it is predictable, then your model should predict that it does predict, because Mick's done it, where the curve is supposed to be, and it's not there. Why not? Oh, well, we can't see the ballroom, so you're misinterpreting your own evidence. I'm like, no, I'm not. He's the one that's obfuscating, yet criticising me for doing that exact thing. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. So when it gets to that point, when I'm being accused of obfuscating, and he can't realise that it's actually him that's obfuscating, and I'm trying to pin him down to a particular point and say, address that one point, basically it's ended the conversation if you won't do it. And he didn't do it time and time and time again. And every time he accused me of obfuscating backwards, literally he gets closer and closer to the point where I just press the eject button. Imagine that. Do you remember the scene on James Bond where he flicks up the gear and there's a red button underneath it and he presses the button and the guy in the passenger seat, well, that's exactly what I was like last night. I was thinking, say that word one more time. And he pushed it and pushed it and pushed it. And then I flicked the gear and I pressed the red button. Soundly just went, that's what it was.
Say what again, motherfucker? Remember that? Pulp Fiction.
Yeah. Wasn't it? It was Samuel L. Jackson, wasn't it? In what was it? What film was it where he said, "Say that word one more time"? And I think it's in something like Die Hard with
Pulp
a
Fiction.
Vengeance.
Say what
was
one
it?
more time. So the guy, he ends up shooting him, but he keeps asking him where it's the guy who's getting the suitcase off with the imaginary item we never get to see. But he just keeps saying, what? He asks him what colour Marcellus Wallace is. And he goes, what?
So was it Samuel L. Jackson that said it?
Yeah, Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah, okay. So I'm remembering the scene, but I'm not remembering the movie.
He shoots him in the leg, and he says, what does Marcellus Wallace look like? He's black. Yes. He's bald. Yes. Does he look like a bitch? Well, why are you trying to fuck him like a bitch, Brad?
But yeah, I mean, it gets to the point where literally when Soundly's being presented with evidence that's completely contradictory to his own belief and his own predictable nature of his own model, and then when I'm trying to get him to explain where the curve is, and he then accuses me of obfuscating. I mean, the guy's literally refusing to address where the curve is and then criticizing me for obfuscation. And that, like I say, you can only do that so many times before you become discredited. And that's what he did. That's the reason why I kicked him. And the reality is, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have kicked him. Maybe I should have pinned him down. But like I say, there's only so many times that you can be accused of doing something. And he's doing the exact thing he's accusing me of, which is the hypocrisy of it all. It's ridiculous. So yeah, I lost my patience with him. Soundly, I'm sorry I kicked you, but you deserved it.
What's his name?
He's going to project. That's what's going to happen. That's all it was. It was just projection. So yeah, he's projecting his own nonsense back onto you, and you got sick of it, and I don't blame you, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, there's only, like I say, there's only so many times that you can press my button, and I've done it loads and loads and loads, and he carried on and carried on. And listen, I don't mind being wrong. I mean, none of us really know what's going on, but when Soundly is being pointed into a direction to look at a specific piece of evidence and explain why it's not there, it's like Jem Panda refusing to address why there's no 24-hour Antarctica sun. It's important. Where's the curve that's supposed to be there and it isn't there? Where is it?
Did Robert Shortman come up at all when you talked to Jem about the 24-hour sun? Because he gives a first-hand account of it not setting, and he was down there for 12 months consecutively.
No, his name didn't come up. No.
Well, it's, the guy's giving a first-hand account. It's not hearsay. It's his account of being in Antarctica and not seeing the 24-hour sun ever happen, ever.
Yeah, but how's that any different to any of the NASA astronauts saying that they went to the moon? First hand.
Well,
do you know what I mean?
It's back to what's the supporting evidence for the contrary. So if they're going to say there is a 24-hour sun, well, let's see it then. What we don't see is that. We see shadows going halfway around a stick. And what
jumping.
Robert Shortman said basically corroborates that. So, you could say it's just his account. It's just like the NASA stuff. But you've got to back it up with the evidence if you're going to contradict it, which is to say you've got to show me an actual 24-hour sun. You've got to show it going around, not this CGI nonsense with a watch or, shadows going around from some station. You'd think they'd do it tomorrow. This is a hotly debated subject. Go down there tomorrow, set up a time lapse, and do it repeatedly. But they come up with excuses. Oh, the data's too long, or Jaren goes through it to the nth degree. But there's always some excuse. And again, if you're a heliocentric believer, you'll gobble that excuse right up.
Yeah, but to be honest with you, if they could do it credibly and repeatedly and reliably, so that literally, like, they could put this, they really could put this to bed. They could just get a plane to take off from South America or South Africa, fly over the southern coast, the southern pole, back up the other side to wherever it pops out, and then literally prove it with videos. They could prove it. They really could prove it, but they're never going to do it, and we all know why. But nobody sees it as a problem that we haven't got the evidence that proves curve. We can't go over the southern pole. Oh, but well, we can travel over Antarctica. Yeah, we go around the outside edges of it, but we don't know how deep that ice goes back before it's considered another world. If it is really the case that you can fly over the southern pole, fly over it, go right over the middle of it, come back out the other side, and show. Because I mean, literally on the flat Earth map, whatever that map may be, you cannot get from one continent to the other without doing like 25,000 miles and it taking hours. That's really, they could sort that out in one flight. One flight. One sec, my phone's ringing. Oh, she's got it. The other thing is, have you seen Rich Thrive and Survive recently? He's bought into the Pac-Man model.
I heard you mention it I haven't actually seen him profess that he's into this teleporting nonsense. I mean, I've already given my opinion. What do you think?
Well, I was just about to fucking say that, Anthony. You just fucking said it while I was about to say those words. And I spoke to someone the other day that really believes, a crazy person actually, crazy girl, that believes that the circle model doesn't make any sense, but the fucking sun travels in a straight line, and that the Pac-Man model works.
Yeah, I've asked Rich, can I interview him on this basis on a critical level? Because when I first got into Flat Earth, he was one of the most proactive video makers out there for me at the time. And I had an open dialogue with him almost. I was like emailing him kind of like 2 or 3 times a day at one point because I was so incensed with what was going on in terms of how he was explaining. And it was, for me, I needed more and more and more. I was like a sponge absorbing everything and trying to work out how much of it was true, how much of it was potentially true, and how much of it was gish gash. And I was so absorbed by a lot of his videos. And then when he's come out with this claim that he's bought into the Pac-Man model, for me personally, I want to know what evidence he accepts that makes him think that Pac-Man is potentially real. So I've asked him, can I interview you on a critical level, a respectful but critical, because I want to see why you think this. I mean, for the last, at least 18 months, he's been going on about it being flat. And he's talked about undergroundness and all these other things, and colloidal silver, and he's gone off on distractions. And he does have a he has a monetized account. But I'm wondering why has he now accepted Pac-Man when it makes no logical sense? So I want to see the evidence base for it, because I'm wondering, like, why else would you do it? I mean, what's going on here? You've advocated that we live on a flat plane for donkey's years, but apparently he said that nothing works on the azimuthal equidistant.
Yeah, I agree with him. I mean, the azimuthal equidistant map, like absolutely every other map in existence. If you've got a deception that revolves around land, what do you think you're going to fudge first? The maps. Yeah. So the fact that the azimuthal equidistant map doesn't work is neither here nor there to me in a deception about maps.
And the other thing is with the azimuthal equidistant map, the only purpose, let's remind ourselves what the original purpose of that map was. And it was literally to establish the time zones between the land masses. That's why there's 2 rulers, one of which has been ripped off and the other one's only got half of it left. But essentially what that map was about was you put the ruler in one part for where you are, you put your ruler in the other part for where they are, and you work your way down it, and it tells you what the time variation is, and that's it. That's all it was about. It wasn't about it being a flat Earth map. It's just been adopted as something that's an alternative reference point to the heliocentric model, because it seems to do the same kind of job. Yeah, maybe this, that, the other doesn't work about it, but there's loads of things that don't work on the heliocentric map anyway, like the Mercator map and all this kind of stuff. So I agree. It's bullshit, but we don't know again, why are we even having the discussion? Why is it not already long established with reliable, credible, repeatable evidence that nobody really sinisterly thinks or critically thinks against? Because it should be so easy to prove. It should be so easy to create really, it's a failing on NASA's part for failing to give us decent evidence. Because otherwise we would not be questioning it. We would not be challenging people. There wouldn't be a discussion. It just wouldn't happen. So it's down to NASA not giving us the evidence that everyone's really paid for. And it's wrong. It's just abhorrent that they can't do it.
Well,
I think couldn't agree more. It's an outrage. Totally agree.
Well, I don't expect much from NASA, but we should be able to figure these things out, I think. That's why I like CD's stance on this, take back space, because he's all about, just erasing and writing a new narrative, starting fresh and making our own observations. Walter Russell said we should, a 7-year-old should understand the cosmology of where we live, should understand astronomy and that sort of thing.
Well, we kind of are doing that, aren't we? We're kind of starting again, like looking at things like the moon and thinking, if it isn't a planet, what is it? Oh, it's technically not a planet. It's technically a moon, yeah, but ultimately it's still a piece of rock, isn't it? That's what we're told it is. We're kind of redesigning it ourselves with trial and error, because, I mean, let's be honest, none of us got enough money to be able to do stuff properly. And we're ridiculed. At every corner, we're ridiculed. It's like I said to Tim last night, do you think I enjoy being the only gay in the village? We're a minority group. You may as well be whatever minority group you choose. I mean, I asked one of my mates the other day, he's gay, and I said, did you get a lot of shit when you came out? And he says, why would you ask that now at this point in your life? If you were 17 asking me that question, I could get it. But why are you asking that now at this point in life? And the answer is, it's hard. I think it's harder to come out as a flat earther than it is to come out admitting that you're gay. And it's like, it shouldn't be. We should be able to talk about it without it being ridiculed. But the ridicule is massive. It's still there, and it's there all day, every single day. But I mean, ask about it. Think about it. If you were gay, or if you were a flat earther, which one would you rather be if you had to come out and tell the world? It's probably harder to admit that you're a flat earther.
Well, being gay is positively encouraged. There's no, I don't know if we'll get into the transgender agenda in this particular.
No, I don't mean it as a negative. You know what I'm saying when I say that? It's not easy if you are gay to come out of the closet and say that you're gay, and that's the dilemma that every gay has, rightly or wrongly or equally. I'm not talking about the ethics of it. I'm just saying that it's not easy to come out of the closet and say that you don't believe we live on a ball anymore, and you definitely don't want to say I'm now a flat earther. It is ridiculous. It really is.
Well, when I came out of the closet, it was a lot easier than what I have to deal with now with flat Earth, you know.
I've had the most unusual response back from Tim Osman. After last night's chat, I thanked him afterwards privately and and I just said, like, thanks for your time. I thought you were coming on to kick my ass for something I'd said. And he was actually a gentleman. He wasn't aggressive at all. So I just sent him the courtesy email back saying thanks very much, and he sent me back this response, and it's basically a quote but without the quotes. I'm kind of half inclined to think about reading it, but on the other hand, there's nothing in it that's serious in terms of its real. Yeah, let me read it. I just said, thanks for your time tonight, man. I enjoyed it. Anytime you want to rehang or battle or even team up as friends together, regardless of flat earth discussion, I'll chat to you. It's fine. And then he's responded and said, to know things that belong to this higher regions of thought, we must be able to raise ourselves to those regions. And as there are few who have the power to do so, the consequence is that as soon as we begin to speak of such things, misunderstandings arise. Nearly all of the theological and philosophical quarrels and disputes among men arise from a misunderstanding of the meaning of terms. So long as men speak of these things that can be perceived by the external senses and which therefore come within everybody's experience, human language is sufficient to enable men to convey their ideas to each other. But when they attempt to build the tower of their ideas into the higher regions of thought and to speak of things which are beyond the grasp of their intellectual comprehension and beyond their experience, then the Babylonian confusion begins, because each man forms a conception of his own regarding such things differing from the conception of others, and whilst all use the same words, yet everyone interprets its meaning in a different way. How deep is that for a philosophical answer from Tim? Whoa,
heavy, man.
Yeah, it is heavy, but that's cool. I like shit like that because that's kind of intelligence. It's acknowledging that I was thanking him, but not doing it in a bromantic way. He was doing it in a philosophical stance, which is a sign of intelligence. I liked him, and I don't think he's a perfect guy by any chance. I know that he's had bad issues with numerous people, but he's an interesting guy. He really is.
Yeah, his proof is what the fuck was it? It was shit. Eclipses, I think it was. No, he was star trails and eclipses. But
yeah,
I don't buy.
Well, now I've told him about Lilith. He kind of like that puts a spanner in his work. So maybe he'll be considering what Lilith is now and frantically looking up these almanac things. So maybe he's going to go away and reconsider his position. Maybe. But listen, gents, I need to go and do something. I'm going to have to love you and leave you. Carry on without me. But thanks very much for your time, Nath. And you, same for you.
Yeah, good talking to you, Anthony.
Yeah, likewise. I'll be back in about an hour or so, but I know you won't be on then. But I'm on with IPS later on. IPS, we're going to be dishing the dirt with Mick West. So if you watch IPS a bit later on, you should see me with him.
What do you mean?
Excellent.
You guys are talking to him?
I'll just before you carry on, Jonathan, I'll let Anthony have a proper exit. So thank you very much for being here, Anthony. It's been a real pleasure.
No worries.
And hopefully we'll chat again soon. I'm sure we will. We've chatted several times in the last
few
weeks, so.
IPS is booked in for 9:00 UK time, but I think he's just about to try and change it. I've just had a message off him saying, can we do a different time? So it could be 10 or 8, I'm not sure. So just keep your eyes open for IPS later on tonight, and I'll probably catch up with you all later. But I've got to go. I love you and leave you. Bye for now.
Cool. Well, it gives me an opportunity to actually plug something else that's coming up because of your introduction to what you said about Tim Osman. Just bear with me 1 second. So, what I'll be doing in the near future is chatting with Carly Sunshine about exactly that subject, and I'm going to preface this with a little bit of an introduction to why we got onto this subject. Hope you don't mind talking about this, Jonathan. You good with this?
Talking about what?
Well, it's about trolls and trolling in general. So I'm going to explain the situation. So yesterday it was in Patricia Steer's chat, I think it was. Anyway, Tim Osman came in with his Tim Osman live account and said words to the effect of, "I am Tim Osman and I fear nothing," or something like that, which immediately got him banned. I didn't actually see that, but that was explained to me by Tim Osman in the aftermath. Subsequently, he came in under a different name and just spammed the chat. And, of course, there's a few different wrenches in there, and they're banning multiple accounts over and over again. And I half figured out who it was by what he was saying, which is to say that by banning me, you're forcing me to come in with these sock accounts and spam you. Now, the reality that I've tried to put out on a couple of recent video logs is that there's only going to be two different types of people that end up getting banned. One is a guy like me, and I'm going to say this, and whether or not it makes any difference, I don't care. But when I was first in Flat Earth, I would be a naysayer, if you like. I was a flat earther, but there was things that I disagreed with, and at the time, Globebusters was broadcast on Jeranism's channel, and I subsequently got banned. And I am still banned to this day, which means that I very rarely watch any Jeranism live stream. That's just the reality, because it's boring if you can't chat. That's why I don't chat. So me, I've not got 500 accounts to go back in and spam whatever my point of view was. I've just lost a bit of interest. That's the reality. The other type of person, me being the example of someone with one account, I've actually got 3, but they're all working channels. The other example is someone like Tim Osman, who has been here longer than me. He's here for the long haul. Some people, like on the panel today, like the guy. Me, I don't like him. He knows I don't like him. We still converse. We're quite cordial with each other. But I don't like the guy, and he knows it. Doesn't mean I will be spamming him or trying to dox him or any of this other crap. He's just a guy, and that's all it's ever going to be. He's just a guy. But a guy who sees the need to spend quite a lot of time churning out 500 accounts just so he can go back in after being banned by whoever. So to me, on that logic, there's no point in banning people, because you're either going to ban someone who hasn't got 100 accounts and they just won't come back, they're just disagreeable for whatever reason, or you'll ban somebody like David Quintana or Tim Osman, and they've got a squillion accounts. They'll just keep coming back. So you can't knock them over the head. It's just whack-a-mole. And then when you do that, the chat is completely ruined. As soon as somebody comes in and starts spamming, that's all that anybody in the chat wants to talk about. All the moderators want to talk about is the fact that they're banning them, and the conversation that anybody was having is completely lost. So I'm not condoning Tim Osman and his actions. Far from it. I disagree with a lot of what he's done, and in private conversations I still remind him of that. So it's not like I'm advocating any of these trolls' actions. But what I will say is there's zero point in banning them, because they just come back. And if in the crossfire, as IPS puts it, a few people get banned, it's like, well, that's disappointing, because people like me will no longer watch those shows simply because they're banned. Name and shame, why not? Dell did the same thing to me. There's often times that I am disagreeable. I'm not just a circle jerker. I'm going to disagree with things. And I'll often agree with some of the trolls' points if they're valid. And some of the people in Flat Earth really dislike that. I'm losing friends rapidly over it. And I'm not going to change my values. I see banning trolls as pointless. And if they're naysaying, why not address them? Why not listen to them? As opposed to just saying, goodbye, banned. That just to me is a waste of time, especially if they'll completely destroy the chat afterwards. So anyway, enough of the build up to it. Based on that, I'm going to be having a chat with Carly Sunshine. So obviously we've plugged IPS's chat, which will be coming up at maybe 9 or 10 p.m. today with Anthony Riley. But in the next few days, I'm hoping to chat with Carly Sunshine about the subjects of trolling And, more importantly, about Carly Sunshine herself, because I don't know if you'd agree, Jonathan, her work has taken a bit of a leap forward. It's gone up a notch in terms of its quality, and it's a really good thing to see. And, along with her travelling vast distances to see flat Earth signs and other bits and bobs that she's been doing, she's doing some really good work. And in a recent chat, when she was saying words along the lines of, I've fought tooth and nail for every one of my subscribers, and I worked really hard to get them, I was kind of on her right shoulder saying, yeah, I agree with you. I know exactly what you mean. You are working really hard, and it's nice to get some acknowledgement of that. So first and foremost, I'll be chatting about Carly Sunshine's excellent work, but along with that will go a conversation about trolls and trolling. And I hope she is, in contrast to my opinion, she will have a different opinion to me, very different, and that hopefully will become a good conversation. Was there anything else you wanted to add? I haven't really chatted with you much, have I, Jonathan, thanks to baby issues and settling children.
I was going to say, it becomes an echo chamber when no one offers any counterpoint. And what you were offering was counterpoint. Everyone should be open to that. If this is going to be like real science, and here we are bitching about the scientific method, like flat earthers always saying, scientific method, it's got to be, you got to have an experiment first. I just read it. The proper scientific experiment is observation, create a hypothesis. Observation, observe something you'd like to understand better. Come up with a possible explanation for your observation. Prediction, note what you will think will happen in a particular situation. Experiment, perform an experiment to test the prediction. Then results do not match the prediction, go back and come up with a revised hypothesis. Or if they match the prediction, do more experiments to be sure and publish your theory. That's what this silly book says. But if we should be knocking down all the flat earth assumptions and proofs and stuff like that to come up with better proofs, and if they stand, then they stand. But that's why I like what Ben is doing, matrix decode. He's saying these curvature tests aren't 100%, and he's kind of got a point with it, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
because he's saying we need to trim the fat and refine some of the things that we're saying. In the beginning, I thought there was some ridiculous arguments like we can't feel the Earth spinning because, or the Earth's not spinning because we can't feel it. Like that's ridiculous. Like you wouldn't feel it.
That shows lack of understanding of the heliocentric system and a lack of understanding of gravity. And a lot of the people who are called trolls will point that out all day long. It's like, well, you don't actually understand the true explanation for why that happens. You're just saying nonsense like, I can't feel it. And that's frustrating because understanding that I keep calling it, I'm going to stick with it, the heliocentric smear of bullshit is a way in to be able to debate these people and point out where it's fallacious. But if you don't understand it in the first place, how are you going to ever debate it? You've got no hope. But like you say, we do have people in flat Earth that will just come out with complete and utter garbage.
Yeah, or people that are just parroting something that they've read. And, as for trolls, I think it's some people just want to be heard. And that's why the first time I had a hangout and Tim Osmond popped up, he was doing I don't know if it was him, 100% him. I think there's also other people doing this. I don't think it's always him, but, I don't really know for 100%. Then I was like, well, just come on and say what you have to say. And then he did, and we talked about 9/11 or something like that. So a couple of other times where I was doing a hangout and he showed up, I just let him say what he had to say. And it turned out, he's just a guy who believes his version. I don't really, it's kind of good that he's there because he's bringing up he's challenging the argument a little bit more, where some people should be challenged, these flat earth ideas all the time. If we're going to go with the scientific method properly, science doesn't like question marks. So they've just said, fuck it. We're just going to go with theory. We're just going to present theory as fact, and no one's going to notice. And if they do notice, it's too big at this point. It's too ingrained into people's heads.
Or if they do notice, they'll just come up with a newer, better explanation. You know, for every Robotham experiment that's listed, there's typically a heliocentric debunking for the same experiment. And obviously you've got to weigh it up on evidence, but if, like when the vaxxed doctor got discredited, most people just went, oh, that doctor's been discredited. Let's give it no further thought. Because the people who control us tell us he's been discredited.
Yeah, as for being, I was banned on Globebusters in the beginning too, actually. And then I had to let Bob know, and then he brought me back. I don't know why I was banned, but it might have been for disagreeing. But that was like a long time ago. I didn't even know that I was banned too. But I was banned on IPS's channel for saying he had 268 viewers and nothing was being said. Because it was just him looking at that's what his chats are, or his hangouts are. It's just him on a computer, surfing the web, pretty much. I mean, that's what he's doing, and talking at the same time. I don't think a billboard's going to do anything for us. I don't really. If you want to make a statement, you got to have something permanent. It's got to be there forever. It's got to be something that actually makes a statement. But
do you really think the sign made no difference? I mean, it got a certain amount of media attention. There would have been a lot of people who looked at that.
I thought it was pretty cool that it was there. But I'm kind of over the whole yelling it at people thing, because I've figured out people are going to believe what they want to believe. That whether you prove things to them or not, you can show them a flat horizon. And if they're stuck in the heliocentric model, they're stuck there. They need to look for it themselves. They need to seek out this new information. And if that's not the case, then they're happy where they are. And a lot of people that have jobs, intense jobs, something that occupies their entire life, don't have time for this, so they don't even really care. But I mean, it comes down to, does it matter? And I think, your reality does matter to a certain point, and this is our reality. We're not going to know where we're going unless we know where we came from. But what the fuck was I going to say?
You pretty much summed it up. I mean, our place in the world is fundamental. It's always very important.
It's always been flat, technically, according to what we're saying. It's always, it's not, what has it changed? What's different now that we're open and talking about it? How does it change your life? That's the question I've been asking. Like, what does it change in your life?
It's a good question, because on a visual level, on a day-to-day driving around level, on a almost every level that's physical, there's no change. There is zero change. The mental change is enormous. And I was interviewed by Vice the other day, and after the interview had concluded, we were looking out at the horizon, and the person who interviewed me said, as I look out at this horizon, we're looking at the whole London skyline, she says, to me, it looks curved. And I said, oh yeah, we've got a name for that. We call that being a curvert. Seeing a curve where there is none. Because if you've got a better understanding, I'm not going to say good because it makes it sound like she's not got a good understanding. I'm sure she has got a good understanding. But if you've got a very good understanding of the heliocentric system, you understand that you don't get to see curvature at ground level. You're not going to see the Earth actually do that out at the horizon. They say you can see things being obstructed, i.e. boats going over the horizon, but that's not actually seeing the curve. But the cognitive dissonance, that's there no other word to describe it, to looking out, seeing a completely flat horizon, which it is on both models, and saying, I see curvature, is a testament to just how good the brainwashing really is.
Yeah, I was going to say, when people say they see it from an airplane, it's, I kind of got into like a little thing at a family, it was Mother's Day, and people get really touchy. And I looked over and I saw my father looking at me, giving me the face like, oh God, he didn't just flat earth the place. And someone knew what I was talking about, and they were like, no. And I was about to like get thrown out of the place. out of in-laws in-laws sister's boyfriend's place, and I was like, fuck. And then everyone ganged up on me. They were like, that's crazy, that's insane, you know. And the one girl was Australian, and she was like, I'm Australian and I know what I've seen, you know, like, trust me, it's a globe. And they were pretty much telling me, shut up, you know, you don't know what you're talking about, like, you're an idiot. And I was like, the fact that you guys don't even want to look at it, that you're that dismissive of it. If somebody said, even if I was in full belief of the heliocentric model and science, if somebody came up to me and said something like this, the earth is flat, and they believed it, and they explained to me that there's like a lot of people online that also believe it, I would at least be interested in it. You know, and that just shows who I am, you know. I have to look at it. You know, just like the first time I saw it, I was like, I've got to check this out. Because, like, how are they proving this? You know, like, I gotta look. And the fact that people are so dismissive just shows that they're really selective about what they want to be interested in. You know, they're going to pick and choose. And people are screwed up that way, unfortunately.
It's screwed up by brainwashing. It's back to being a pervert. Yeah. I had the same exact thing with a member of my family. So I was told in no uncertain terms that they'd seen the curve from an aeroplane. Now, not at the time, or recent, or close to the time, I just stopped a job where I was travelling all over the world, all day long, every day. You know, it was a different type of experience when you have a good understanding of the heliocentric model. And at the time I was travelling, I did. You know, I was acutely aware that you couldn't see the curve from an aeroplane. You know, and I always used to fantasize about going higher. Oh, I'd love to go up higher. I'd love to see the curve. So even before Flat Earth, if someone had said, oh, I've seen the curve from a plane window, I'd be like, no, you haven't. Don't be so ridiculous. You can't see the curve. You're just not high enough from an aeroplane. That's ridiculous. But then when Flat Earth comes along, you go, hang on a second. So we're left in a position where we've never seen a curve, and the only people who tell us there is a curve are these agencies, and we have no way of verifying it. We just have to take it on faith. We just have to believe them. Oh, are you on mute?
If they won't question the moon landing, that's a good sign of, you know, where that conversation is going to go. The fact that this physics teacher, is willing to have the conversation is interesting. And the guy, I once spoke to the guy, he was the secretary of the office, not like the person who answers the phone, but he was the secretary, as in like the treasurer, the secretary in that kind of chain of command thing. So he was number 3 guy for the USGS. And I was asking him about the azimuthal equidistant, you know, how I framed the conversation like, hey, how did they get that map? You know, how did they make that? And then I was going to, you know, I moved in with Flat Earth, and I was like, have you heard this Flat Earth thing? And he didn't object to it, but he didn't go with it. He just kind of listened and said, well, you know, water's not really that flat. It's kind of lumpy, he said. And I was asking him about how they give us these maps and these diagrams of cutaways of the Earth's core and stuff like that. And he was saying it's ground penetrating radar. And we were on the phone for like 40 minutes. I should have recorded it, but I didn't. And I was like, but I mean, come on, ground penetrating radar is only going to show us so much. And it's not going to give us the detail that we're shown in textbooks, things like that. I mean, that's another thing. That not only the shape of the Earth, what the Earth is comprised of, they're giving us a full layout of that, and the moon. I think they've showed pictures of like what the center of the moon is. And no one's.
It gets worse, doesn't it? I mean, that is all there to prop up evolution in terms of the story, but they give you the full shebango. You know, it's not just the layout; it's how it was formed. You know, again, all theory. You know, why? Well, because we say so. You know, they've got no actual. There's no evidence to say that a planet smashed into us and, you know, all the bits then rose up off the surface and culminated in the moon. You know, that story is just a story. It's not fact, but that's how it's sold to us. That's the story of how we came to be on a planet with a much bigger iron core than we should have, which gives us this great big magnetic field protecting us from the sun, giving the planet the ability to have life. Well, all that's happened. That all that is possible simply because Thea smashed into Earth with its standard size core and left, because it was a glancing blow, all of its iron core mushed into Earth, and the rest of it, like I say, became the moon. You're like, what a crock of crap. Where's the proof of this?
Or have you seen the diagram where they show that it looks like almost like a net, and it says this is the Big Bang, and it's like a graph from left to right, and it's got this opening at the end, and it's like, this is the shit that spewed out of it. Like this, well, what happens before that? The fact that they can't answer that, and they won't even go near that question. And that I liken that to Newton not knowing how the apple got up into the tree to begin with. Leaving that part out is more important than why it's falling off the tree, why it's falling off the branch. And that essentially is just an analogy for leaving the creator out of the creation. That's still creating too. That's my model. This thing is still doing what it always does, that there's no beginning, there's no end.
That was the point my uncle got to, who is a creationist Christian, and he went and debated Stephen Hawking, and basically the point that they got to, the end pass they got to, was the Big Bang, because my creationist uncle, Adrian Hawkes, was saying, well, what about before it? What happens before? His answer obviously is God. I mean, it seems as we progress through Flat Earth, and this is something that's come from IPS, that a lot of the top quality debunkings of things like evolution do come from Christian channels, and then they put their rhetoric on at the end. It's like The Truth is Stranger Than Fiction. I don't know if you watch his channel. Wonderful channel. For 80% of the video, until you get to the end and he draws a conclusion that Jesus or God or this Bible verse, but it just seems there is a common theme in conspiracy where the nonsense that's provided by scientism is debunked by Christians. Not anymore. Since Flat Earth, it seems that that's being kicked to the wayside. I mean, I can guess why it's sort of set up like that, if you will, for obvious reasons. You're back into a different paradigm if you go with the Christians debunking. The idea is that you have to then believe the rest of their story. And people like IPS have come along and go, no, you can, or even Tiger Dan, chew the meat and spit out the bones.
Yeah. Take the good part and leave out the rest. They're not hurting, but a lot of people that are outside of this look at the biblical side. They look at they're on the radar, the Christian flat earthers. A lot of people write this off as a Christian thing. I've noticed when I see it in like articles or something like that, like articles online, it's dismissed as like a Christian ideal. When this makes this, with the Bible, there's so many interpretations of what's been written. There's so many different. I just put a video up on it's a lecture. It's an Alan Watts lecture, and he goes through why the Bible why you shouldn't worship the Bible at all. How it's just words, and seldom do words ever bring divine inspiration. And they don't. They can't. And a lot of it, and he goes through why Jesus is thought of as the person that he is. And I like how he doesn't go into, and never does go into, whether or not Jesus existed. Because that to me is pointless. That's beside the point. It doesn't matter. It's a story. It doesn't matter if he existed or not. What's important is what the book says and how people are misreading it because of the King James Version, and how certain things are translated in certain ways than the Greek translation. And the italics they use, the punctuation they use, and stuff like that. But what was Anthony talking about before about Mick West? I know the guy in Joe Rogan who's wetting Rogan's balls about flat Earth.
Yeah, he was basically what Mick West has got on his website is an extra equation incorporated into the 8 inches per mile squared equation, which is standard refraction. And in essence, what Anthony has gone out and done is debunked it. There's no other way to put it. You probably heard me saying to him about how much do you give him credibility using Tim's words, but that's, to me, needs nipping in the bud, because that potentially could just get factored into the new maths for the heliocentric curve of Earth, and it's just, I keep saying it, it's just another heliocentric smear of bullshit, and we're addressing them one at a time. You know, that can't just be let out there as, well, it's just because of refraction and it's a very complicated equation, you may not understand it. It's like, no, let's have a really good look at it, let's really understand what's going on out there and see if it matches up with the evidence. And basically Anthony went out at night and took a photo of the tower, and it didn't have the curve of the Earth blocking 2/3 of the tower. It was all there, nice and lit, and I would argue that you could see right down to the base of it. You know, that's fallacious, because the other side of the coin would argue that the bottom of it's being hidden by curvature, which again is totally fallacious. But, you know, it's one of those. Was there anything else you want to add? Because my wife's come home and I'm going to give her some greetings and some love and all the rest of the things that she should be getting now. So was there anything you wanted to plug other than the Alan Watts interview that you put up on your channel?
No, I suggest everyone check it out, because it's really it's a good 50-minute lecture, and really interesting about what, you know, Jesus was here to teach us and who we really are in relation to it. I don't know, just it's good. All Alan Watts' stuff is good, man. It's all, just listening to his voice is soothing. You know, he's an old English guy. He's like half English, half American, but just, yeah, he makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Cool. With that, I'm going to say a big massive thank you, because you've held the fort for such a long time while I was settling my daughter, so I didn't have as much participation as I'd hoped for. But thank you very much for holding the fort and chatting with me. It's been really nice.
No problem.
Right, I will leave you to it and cut you off and just round out this show and end the broadcast. Thanks much, Jonathan Vincent, Haunted House. Subscribe. I'll see you later, my friend.
Okay, buddy. I'll talk to you later.
And with that, I'm going to also say a massive thank you to everybody who has joined us in the live audience for this show. Unfortunately, as the description says, we were supposed to have Nick from Phuket Word, but unfortunately Nick was unavailable today, so we carried out the show anyway, and hopefully there's been plenty of decent information. To all the people who donated to the Super Chat, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Unexpected surprise to see a few Super Chats going up. I don't pay too much attention to the chat when I'm settling my daughter, so if I've missed you and haven't thanked you, this is my opportunity to say a big, massive thank you to you now. So yes, thank you very much for joining me. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share the video. Comment below. I've been Nathan Oakley. I'll see you all in the next video.